Good morning, Morena Koto. I figured we could start a few minutes early, given everyone's here, and I've finished my very involved setup. So welcome. It's my pleasure to open this hearing today for RC 250044 Road Metals Company Limited. My name is Ros Day Cleven. I'm an independent commissioner appointed by the council to chair this hearing today. I've got a background in resource management planning, and I'm from Ōtepoti, Dunedin. I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves now.
Stacey Peterson, councillor and commissioner.
Martin McPherson, Vincent, councillor and commissioner.
Sarah Brown, same councillor for Cromwell.
Thank you.
Taryn Lyons, I'm hearing administrator.
Jessie Dick, I'm hearing administrator as well. I have also this direction.
I'd like to add in the ecologist. That's probably the time with it. Davis and planning officer.
Kenneth Merkin, that's on the
From the page on the Auckland Council. Yeah. Jared Alston, General Manager for Roads. Kerry Living, Planning Consultant.
BSB landscape for the applicant.
Wonderful. Thank you. And can everyone hear us? Could you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, good morning again, team. My name's Ruben Morrison. I was the ecologist on this project. We can hear you. It's not super loud, but I think it'll be okay.
My name's Donovan Van Kegum. I'm the air quality expert representing Road Metals.
And good morning, Gary Walton from Marshall Day Acoustics, noise expert for Road Metals.
Thank you. And Mr. Page, in terms of your team lineup, Mr. Patterson is not in attendance, which has been sorted. The panel did have a conversation this morning, and we have no questions for Mr. Van Keeken. So if Mr. Van Keeken, it was lovely to see you, but we have no questions for you today.
That's lovely.
Yes, thank you. That would be, if there's anything he would like to bring to our attention, that would be useful.
Sure. But he had intended to brief oral overview of his evidence, but that's not going to assist you. Let's not waste our time doing that.
Okay.
I'll just invite him to confirm that his evidence is true and correct, and he can depart.
Thank you.
Yes, my evidence is true and correct, and I will leave you to your proceedings. Feel free to get a hold of me if you have any questions that pop up during the hearing.
Thank you very much.
That's
Thanks,
it.
Dean. Bye.
Thank you. And I just note that it is quite hard to hear with the air conditioning in this room at the best of times. So can I ask all of you to project your voices for the people here present, but also for the people online? Thank you. Okay, we don't have any submitters here today. Everyone at the back, who have we got here today?
Can I do some introduction?
Yes, please.
There's a Road Metals team at the back of the room. Mr. Johnny Fast, is the director and owner of the company.
Yep.
And Richard Harding, who conducted your assignments.
Yes.
And Tom Stewart, our central target manager, Tom Dewey. Also, and Logan Copeland's our traffic expert, and he's sitting at the back. You'll hear from him later.
Thank you. And who have we got at the back here?
Just Matt from Logan.
Oh, hi, Matt. Interested person. What's your name, sir? Noddy. Okay, thank you. Roddy.
And I'm Sophia also.
Great. Oh, thank you for being here today. So you're just observing. Lovely. Thank you. Ms. Lyons, could you please do some housekeeping for us?
Yes, so health and safety, if they're in the event of a fire out this door, and then we will all meet in the main building car park. There are toilets just out that door and straight out there. and water over there. If anybody needs anything, you can ask Jessie and I, and we should be able to assist.
Thank you. So moving on to procedural matters. So I'd like to acknowledge there was a bit of a procedural matter that we had to work through prior to the commencement of the hearing. I would just like to thank the applicant for its assistance and patience as we worked through that. Wasn't ideal with the compressed timeframes. However, we seem to have resolved that matter and we're able to commence the hearing today. So yeah, once again, thank you from the panel for your assistance. The panel attended the site last week with Mr. Hardwick, who we understood as the Otago area manager. And he kindly escorted us around the site. We had a very thorough visit around through from the access way, through where the culvert and the proposed wetlands will be, around the whole perimeter of the site. We observed all the key features of the proposal from different vantage points, and also located the different, some of the affected party approvals and locations around the area. So we thank the applicant for arranging that for us. It was very helpful. Any other procedural matters that any party would like to raise before we commence? No? Okay, thank you. Quick note that we are being recorded today, and that will be loaded onto YouTube, isn't it? Yep, YouTube. Admin, script.
All statutory requirements under section 95 of the Resource Management Act have been complied with. The section 42A report prepared by the planning officer has been circulated to the address for service and all submitters. The submissions received have been identified in the report.
Thank you. Okay, so over to you now, Mr. Page, for the applicant to hear your case.
Jolly good. Thank you for that. Now, I'll just do a brief run through about how we intend the sequence of the presentation to go. But what I will do is preface that by saying that I would prefer that the hearing is run relatively informally, because things will occur to you, questions will occur to you as we proceed, and it is much easier for us to deal with those while they're fresh in the mind rather than wait to the end of someone's presentation. So Kerry is the author of the application, and across all of the detail of that. Ben is our landscape expert who is particularly across the landscape design proposal. And so if you have questions as we're going about what the application actually proposes, Ben and Kerry will be able to deal with that as we go. In terms of how the site is actually going to be managed and works, that's something that Jared's going to speak to. And we were particularly focused on preparing the supplementary evidence on stage 3, given the uncertainty expressed in the 42A report about how that's going to work. And so we know that you've had a thorough site visit, but if there are aspects of how stage 3 is to be managed at a practical site development level, then Jared's across all of that, and so we can help you with that as we go. I'm going to refer to some documents as I do the opening. The easiest way to find the plans in Ben Espy's evidence. There is an appendix to his evidence in chief, which contain the plans, particularly the stage 3 staging plan. But attached to Ben's supplementary evidence is the most recent version of the site plan, which picks up some additional mitigation planting, which is shown in purple on the plan. So Ben can speak to that when we get to it. But if you're looking for a plan to either understand what's being said or ask questions, Ben's evidence is the easiest way to find that plan.
Thank you.
In terms of the conditions, Kerry has worked on the conditions, and the most recent version of those conditions are attached to the supplementary evidence, and it is tracked in 2 different colours. The red tracking is from his evidence in chief and the blue tracking is from his supplementary evidence. So if you want to discuss or raise questions about evidence, about conditions, then Kerry's supplementary evidence is the easiest way to find that.
Thank you.
In terms of the sequence of our presentation this morning, I'm going to address you on particularly the cumulative effects and national policy statement issues. And Hannah's going to address you on the bond condition and the consent duration condition. So that's the way that we're going to divide things up between ourselves. And then Jared is going to present a written summary of his evidence that I think Taryn has. He will speak to that. And after Jared, Gary Walton is going to produce a short oral summary of his acoustic evidence. After Gary, Ruben will do the same in relation to his ecology evidence. And Logan, who's here at the back room, will confirm his traffic evidence. Then being on landscape and Kerry in relation to planning matters. As far as we know at this stage, we don't think that there are any outstanding issues between our team and council staff in relation to noise and traffic. It seems that the main issues are in relation to ecology and landscape. That's at least as we understand it at the moment. And so turning to the opening submissions, these are rather lengthier than I would have liked, not because we haven't taken the time to prune them, but because of the way in which Section 42A report unfolded. So there were a few loose ends that we needed to address. From my paragraph 10, I've picked up an issue about how the political baseline works. Now, we're not saying that the permitted baseline is a critical issue here, because earthworks for quarrying is permitted only up to 2,000 square metres or 3,000 cubes. Now, this is obviously a very different scale to that. So we're not saying they're comparable. But what we're picking up on is one of the reasons that the reporting officer declined to apply the permitted baseline is his assessment that quarrying activities are not anticipated in the zone. And that is where we say the reporting officer has gotten off on the wrong foot. And what I've done through paragraphs 12 to 16 is tracked through how the district plan acknowledges that minerals are an important issue for the district, and that quarrying can only take place where those minerals exist, and that's exclusively in the rural zone. You are not going to find quarrying activities anywhere else in the rural zone. That's absolutely consistent across every district plan. I don't have anything to deal with across the South Island. So my submission to you is that the planning advice that quarrying is not anticipated in the rural resource area is just plain wrong. And that has coloured the recommendations in relation to the appropriateness of this proposal, because effectively they're saying square peg round hole. That's just not how the district plan works. The next issue that I want to address is in relation to cumulative effects. Now, I think what has happened in the Section 42A report is that the words cumulative effects have been used in a way that is not technically correct in terms of what the Act defines cumulative effects to be. And what a cumulative effect is explained by the Court of Appeal in the Dye case. And you'll see the quote at the bottom of paragraph 21 of my written submissions. And what the Court of Appeal says is it's the concept of a combination with other effects, where what this seems rather abstract. The concept of combination of other effects is one effect A combining with effects B and C to create an overall composite effect D. All of these are effects which are going to happen as a result of the activity which is under consideration. So what they're saying is that, is there an effect that is already part of the environment? Is there an effect which will happen as a consequence of this application? And are those two things going to combine together to make a third cumulative effect? The two things are added together. So it's existing environment plus what is proposed. What is the result of that? Is that something new, a cumulative effect? So that is what the Act means when it talks about the cumulative effects of an activity. But what the reporting officer doesn't do is explain what existing effects that are part of the environment that will interact with this proposal to result in a third cumulative effect. And because the reporting officer doesn't identify how that accumulation of proposed effects with existing effects is going to result in something that's unacceptable, my submission to you is that the concept has been misused in the report. What appears to be being said is that there are different effects that arise through this proposal. They might be visual, they might be dust, they might be acoustic, and how those three effects together alter the character of the site. Now, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask, but that's not what the Act means when it talks about cumulative effects. That's a different thing. So my submission to you is that when you are reading the 42A report's advice, ignore the concept of cumulative effects. There isn't any evidence of a cumulative effect. What is being said is that although all the individual effects might be acceptable, that the reporting officer was anxious about, if you look at them all together as a combined thing, is that going to result in a character change to the site that should be regarded as unacceptable in the world? But the problem I have with that approach is that that's not really how the policy framework of the district plan works. If you'll see in my paragraph 27, I've taken you back to the individual policies that Mr. Anderson relies on. From chapter 4, the Urban Resource Area chapter. And as is reasonably common in district plans, the different policies pick up different effects issues as separate issues. So it's not clear to me how the reporting officer has taken individual effects that she says, well, none of the effects are contrary to any of the individual policies, but how do we aggregate them together to result in a recommendation that's declined for stage 3? So coming to my paragraph 28, the problem for Mr. Anderson seems to be at stage 3. At page 18, he says, I have some uncertainty over the effects that would arise during stage 3 of the proposal, given the large scale of the upper terrace, potential duration of the stage, and the lack of detailed plans. So raising a concern about uncertainty about stage 3 at this stage of the process is a little bit frustrating, because those issues were not raised at either time the application was lodged, as the application complete, on notification, knowing how to do the notification assessment, or under section 92. So we haven't had feedback from the officer saying, hang on, don't understand what's going on here. You need to give me some more detailed plans about how stage 3 is going to work. This is the first time that there's a problem with understanding what stage 3 is about. As far as we can tell, the concerns in relation to stage 3 are directed to landscape and visual effects. In you can see I've addressed it, my paragraph 31, picking up my comments at pages 9 and 16 of the 42A report. In relation to visual effects, the concern seems to relate to users of the lock-up burn track. As Wilson considers that the proposal, including stage 3, will involve a change in rural land use and character and modification to the existing landform. This is accepted by Mr. Espin, who concluded that the visual effects experienced by users of the lower part of the lock-up burn track will be low to moderate. However, it is agreed by Mr. Espin and Ms. Wilson that the visual effects from all other viewing audiences will be no more than low. So, what we know about those effects is that they are both temporary and spatially limited. You're not going to see the whole of stage 3 developed at the same time. The proposal is to progressively through that staging plan that you now have, is to progressively rehabilitate the stage 3 of the quarry as it goes. So you're not going to see what you can currently see at Parkburn or the Road Metals quarry next door. We've got near enough to 50 hectares of open quarry at the same time. We're not saying that there's anything wrong with that. That's just different to how this application is going to be managed. So what we've tried to do is to address the concern expressed by Ms. Wilson and Mr. Anderson about stage 3 and have filed the staging plan and additional mitigation that Mr. Espin can talk to. What we don't know, because of the way the sequence of all of this has panned out, is what council staff thinks it will happen. So we don't know, as we sit here, whether Mr. Espin's work has resolved the concerns, or whether we still have a live issue between the Lords and experts. So, in summary about cumulative effects there, we say that there isn't actually any cumulative effects issue because that term is understood by the law. It is reasonable for the reporting officer to say that they are unclear about some aspect of the proposal, since that can always be remedied, and we hope and submit that it has been. But you don't need to make any decisions back. Turning to the national policy statements. Firstly, national policy statement for highly productive land. The 42A officer says that since that instrument was amended in December, they don't need to think about it. If only that were true. My submission is that's not a correct understanding about the changes that were made, but in any event, we arrive at the same result, albeit by a different route. And that was the reason why we had Mr. Edgy Harrison give us economic evidence, so that you had a factual basis on which to conclude that the pathway through clause 3.9 of the NPS is available. And since there isn't any contradictory evidence to Mr. Patterson's my submission, you can safely accept that the activity is an appropriate activity as that term is used under the NPS HPL. So we get to the same result as Mr. Anderson does, but we do it through what my submission is through the clause 3.9 process. The NPS for Indigenous biodiversity. There's two outstanding issues, I think, from a legal standpoint. That's firstly the relevance of whether or not the Central Glen Gully might qualify as an SNA. I'm not sure that Mr. Harding is intending to say it is an SNA, but that has some qualities that might be consistent with being an SNA. We say that doesn't matter, because the SNA provisions were disengaged by section 78 of the RM Freshwater Lands Amendment Act 2024. So it's not your role to decide whether the central gully could potentially be SNA or not. You don't have to worry about it. The process that you go through is, as Mr. Morrison has reported in the supplementary evidence, it's the effects management hierarchy. And he's explained how it is that he has applied the effects management hierarchy and the NPS. Mr. Harding has suggested a covenant in relation to the Central Gully area. Mr. Morrison says we don't need to worry about a covenant in the supplementary evidence because we haven't got to the point through the effects management hierarchy where offsetting compensation is required, and covenanting is a form of compensation. What I would point out though is if we go to the conditions attached to Mr. Vivian's supplementary evidence, there is an express condition restricting vegetation, indigenous vegetation clearance. Sorry. 13. Yep, okay. So if you look at page 11 of Mr. Vivian's supplementary evidence, what you will see, and of course, this was all after Mr. Harding's evidence was filed, that Mr. Vivian has proposed a condition 39, a condition that says no indigenous vegetation clearance is permitted through the Central Gully other than that shown within the extent of earthworks on Restore NZ's refined access route plan during the construction of the access road. So although Road Metals is not offering up covenant, it is offering a condition which, at least as a legal instrument, offers the same protection, which is protection for the indigenous vegetation and gully except for road. It's just it's a condition of consent rather than covenant. But the substance of the obligation is the same. Now, the last issue I want to address is something that neither Mr. Anderson nor Kerry's evidence addresses, which is a new national policy statement which came in December 2025, which is the NPS for infrastructure. It has only one objective. It has a definition of something called infrastructure supporting activities, and that includes quarrying activities. So the purpose of the NPS, what you are being asked to consent is an infrastructure supporting activity. And policy 5 is a recognise and provide for that kind of policy. Requires you to recognise the importance of infrastructure supporting activities and to enable the benefits of them to be realised. Recognising the operational need, the function of some infrastructure supporting activities, including supporting quarrying activities, to operate in be located in or traverse particular environments and locations. So you can only quarry gravel where it exists. And thirdly, enable timely delivery of infrastructure supporting activities. So why does that matter? We don't have a situation such as in the Port Otago or the East-West case in Auckland, where you've got national instruments fighting with each other in different directions and you have to try and figure out who wins. We've only got one NPS that has an enabling policy in relation to quarrying. Even if you were to accept that there is an adverse effect which is more than minor in relation to landscape, my submission, the answer to what you would do with that finding is to weigh that against what the NPS requires you to do to enable infrastructure supporting activities. So this is not a no adverse effects regime. You can find that there are even very substantial adverse effects, but nevertheless, because there is an NPS which requires you to enable quarrying, that you might nevertheless find the application to be acceptable, even if there are adverse effects. So there's nothing of a directive nature in your plan, or in the RPS, or in any national instrument which says no. The only national direction that you've got is to enable.
Mr. Page, can I ask you there, the status of that NPS that was introduced in January, is it, or
Well, it commenced in January.
commenced?
Yeah.
Okay, so has full application, yeah.
So the commencement provision of the NPS is that it applies to the date of commencement. So even if an application was already on foot on that date, so there's no transitional issues that need to worry about.
Thank you.
Really good. That's all I have to say at the moment. I hand over to Hannah to question on bonds.
Would you like me to, or the panel, to ask questions of you now before we get to Ms. Perkins? Okay.
I don't want anyone to lose their train of thought.
No, no, that's right. So I'm interested in the permitted baseline
Yeah,
matter. And I just want to check that I've understood your submissions against my understanding of the permitted baseline.
yes,
So so in essence, you're in agreement that there are activities in terms of quarrying, including earthworks of up to 2,000 to 3,000 metres cubed.
yes,
That would be the effects that the plan permits.
yes,
And you agree that that is you consider that applies, that permitted baseline, but you acknowledge that the proposal is of a different scale to that.
yes.
Okay, thank you. And so the question around whether activities are anticipated by the district plan, that is more, in my mind, is more of a policy question.
Yes.
And that's what you've essentially said as well, is that
Yes.
correct?
No, that's right.
Okay.
So what we were alarmed about is that that was being used as a reason not to apply to them.
Yes, okay,
And the baseline is not decisive.
Yeah.
We're not saying that because you can do 3,000 cubes, therefore you should
Yes.
allow this one. That's not our case.
no,
All
yes.
we're saying is that that was a really bad reason not to apply it.
Yes, yeah. So the two issues have almost been conflated as one thing.
It's a policy. It is acquiring to be anticipated
Yes.
in the rural resource area, even though it requires resource consent.
Great, thank you. And at paragraph 27 of your legal submissions, I wonder if you could just talk me through that again. I wasn't sure what you were meaning at the top of page 8 around aggregated into some sort of overall score.
Oh, right.
Could you just explain that again for me?
Well, what we're trying to unpack is what the 42A report is talking about when it uses the term cumulative effects. And so what I've attempted to do is to explain that what the law understands cumulative effects to be is effects that are already in the environment as what the application proposes. So it's that combination of things.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that is what the 42A report is talking about. What I think the 42A report is talking about is discrete effects that this proposal will produce, noise, dust, traffic movements, landscape, and say that although the proposal is not contrary to each of the individual policies that relate to those discrete issues, that somehow collectively they combine together to make an outcome that's not acceptable.
I see. And that's what you were meaning by aggregating it into a score.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yep.
what I'm saying is that, well, there's nothing in your plan directs that's the right approach to the policy framework.
Yes. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. And this may be a question for Mr. Vivian. It's about a proposed condition in the jurisdiction
Right.
between the ORC and the CODC.
Yes.
It's it's around it was titled Fish Passage Culvert and is now titled Access Road.
Yes,
And the condition is in there with an advice note saying that
yes.
this would be fully met by implementing an existing consent under the ORC. And so I was wondering, in terms of jurisdiction, is it appropriate in a condition of consent to be included within a Central Otago district consent process if it's completely duplicating a condition that exists on another existing consent?
I think the short answer is no, it's not. The conditions around freshwater resources ORC matters. That is a legal issue. I think what we were trying to do is to pick up all of the issues that were picked up by your reporting officers, is how we're going to fix it here.
Make it really clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and so, because it was an issue, I think, raised by Mr. Harding,
Yes.
to try and satisfy that, how do we treat that home in this consent
Yes.
with the ORC consent?
Yes.
But I think what Kerry was doing, the condition drafting, is alluding to the fact that the trout passage problem towards the relaxed habitat has already been addressed by the
Yes.
ORC.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense to me. Thank you. Okay. I'll check if we've got any comments for you, Mr. Page, now. Do you have any questions from Mr. Page before we move on to Ms. Perkins? Okay. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Perkins.
Commissioner. So I will take you through the remainder of our legal submissions, which address the bond condition and the consent duration.
Thank you.
So within the bond condition, the applicant has expressed that they do not oppose the inclusion of the bond benefits. However, the condition that was put forward by Sam has a few issues with that in terms of section 8 and away limits. So Mr. Henderson has not specified an amount of the bond. He also hasn't provided a mechanism within the condition to determine the amount. And nor does the condition provide a sufficient link to compliance with another condition of the consent. So the applicant has sought to remedy this within Mr. Vivian's draft suite of conditions at condition 23 to 24A. So in its recommended form would not be lookable, and we've sought to remedy this by referring to the reinstatement conditions that are at 16 to 20 of Mr. Vivian's conditions. So these are the reinstatement conditions, the spreading of topsoil and reforming of the contours with the landscape. So this provides a base for the bond condition and the amount to be assessed against for how much money it would take to comply with that condition, and that was on the council to undertake that work and that. So in terms of addressing the next piece of uncertainty, which is the amount of the bond, there are two options for the panel to remedy this, and this is either through agreeing on an appropriate amount now, or providing a mechanism within the condition to determine the bond amount at a later date. We submit that the appropriate method to take is by providing a mechanism within the bond condition itself. Is selecting an arbitrary amount without a supporting assessment wouldn't be consistent with the statutory purpose of the bond, which is to provide protection against environmental harm caused by land activities. So conditions 23 to 24 hours to Vivian's suite provide that a quantity survey will be engaged to assess the amount cost of reinstatement for 10 years of quarry operation, and this includes the progressive reinstatement of the quarry, and 10 years was chosen as it provides for a bit of sufficient time to accurately estimate the level of extraction and the amount that therefore will be progressively reinstated. And this approach ensures that the bond is limited to the actual cost of re-spreading the topsoil and completing those reinstatement conditions. Moving to the consent duration, Mr. Anderson's proposed to limit the term of consent to 2050, and his justification for limiting the term of consent is based on three considerations. The first being concern a level of information around stage 3, and then the second is to align with the Otago Regional Council dust consent. So Mr. Anderson, he considers that reducing the term of consent will provide improved clarity and the overall extent of events, and considers that the applicant can reapply for consent if it wishes to go beyond this timeframe. We cannot agree with this position, as the default statutory position for length of land use consents is unlimited, and there are no plan policies or national policy statements that provide information or indication on the limited term of consent for foreign activities. So there must be an appropriate reason to limit the term of consent to 2050. So we have looked to case law and determined what the authorities have said in terms of limiting the consent. So in Ngāti Rangi Trust and Genesis Power, the court considered that having insufficient information before a decision maker is not an appropriate reason to limit the term of consent. And limiting the term of consent due to uncertainty is not consistent with sustainable management. The term of consent hasn't been limited due to any effects or due to any unpredictable change in the receiving environment. What is inappropriate to limit the term itself. So, court in that case concluded that the normal response to such a situation would be conditions for providing review, which these consent conditions have. At condition 25, the council has the ability to review the conditions of consent. And in terms of the relationship of this consent with the Otago Regional Council dust consents, conditions 11 and 12 proposed by the applicant have intended to alleviate this concern by ensuring that the consent won't be operated and that the associated discharges to air and land being active. So we consider that there's no proper basis to limit the land use consent to 2050. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Perkin. I do have a couple of questions of you. The first one relates to the proposed bond conditions. And I was curious, excuse me, curious around, in your experience, bond conditions that you've put forward here quite conventional on quarry activities such as the proposed?
This form.
Yes, with that's kind of specific mechanism that is proposed?
Yes. It is routine that there's no agreed amount to provide a mechanism within the estimate the condition is sufficiently certain. So as there hasn't been an assessment, this is providing certainty and
Yes. Okay, thank you.
More common, Madam Chair, would be an arm wrestle behind the scenes between the applicant and council staff, and everybody agreeing with it. So
Yes,
you have to decide. But
it
the
didn't happen.
opportunity that has to listen.
Sure, yeah, yeah. Thank you. At paragraph 87 of the legal submissions, you've just talked us through in terms of the duration of consent, and you discussed the relationship with conditions 11, 12. So I had a question around if in the event, so 11 and 12, let me just go back there so I can be clear. 11 and 12 ensure that if the regional council consents aren't renewed, then the operations wouldn't continue in any case, is that, yeah. And so does that put at risk any rehabilitation that will be committed? If, say in the scenario, the ORC, for whatever reason, didn't renew those consents, what position would that leave being able to attend to the rehabilitation conditions if work had to cease on the site? Is there a risk there for?
Say, the reinstatement conditions wouldn't, we think that could be communicated and reach the, because of being discharged.
Right. So there's nothing in the ORC consents, if for whatever reason they weren't renewed, there's nothing in there that would be breached if you were to continue to undertake rehabilitation, even though quarrying works had ceased. Does that make sense, my question? Yeah. Bit of a curly one, but yeah, good, thank you.
We don't need consent to do those bits.
No, great, thank you. Any questions from this person? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Well, right now introduces Jared. Hopefully we have a written summary that Jared has.
Yes.
And as I'm sure you can gather that Jared is across all the operational stuff, so if you've got questions about how the plan works, how stage 3 works, all that kind of stuff, Jared's your man. It's all this birthday, so.
Oh, happy birthday. Oh, I feel like we should be singing a song about it now.
We did that at breakfast.
Well, welcome and happy birthday. Thank you for being here today.
I think my team's putting me off my game, don't you? Hey, look, thank you for having me. Look, as I've stated here, and I'll talk to my summary of evidence rather than reading it verbatim. But I'm the general manager for Road Metals. You would have seen in that brief of evidence our long-standing history in Central Otago, dating back to the Clyde Dam era. Up until recent times, we've operated out of 3 fixed sites, being Earnsfleet, Parkburn, and Hawea Flat. Now, the point, I suppose the first point I wanted to make there is that we exited 2 of those quarries, being Parkburn and Hawea Flat, about 5 years ago. It's taken us a long time of scanning land holdings and undertaking plan reviews to identify this site. So it's been 4 years of analysis and due diligence, and it's actually the similar themes that pop up, landscape, ecology, HPL overlays. So when I make the point that we believe this is one of the best sites in Central Otago for quarrying, it's because of that length of time we've been identifying, trying to find the correct land holding. Now, in terms of those high productivity land overlays, that has been a big focus area for us when we've been trying to source and purchase land. And you'll see this site, by and large, almost entirely avoids those overlays. There is 1.8 hectares that does encroach in our proposed quarry area. Now, we have investigated avoiding that area completely just to do away with the issue in front of us. But it is very complex. It's doable, but it creates some quite significant operational challenges for us. And the reason for that, and you'll see this, all aspects of our proposal are interconnected and they are contingent on one another. So if you were to avoid that area, you have to move the settling ponds. At that point, you don't have enough stockpiling room, and so you end up pushing into that upper terrace. And so probably the best way to view this as I'm talking is actually on page 28, my brief of evidence, which has the staging plan there as well, which I'll talk to next.
Yeah.
So the actual 1.8 hectares, if you wanted to look at that, is on page 7. That shows the area within our operational footprint.
Yeah.
But as I've explained in my evidence, it impinges on some of the other aspects. So yes, it cuts down on the stockpiling area, which then creates some health and safety issues for us to overcome. And also, one of the key things we wanted to do is as soon as we can get down, like we want to undertake as much quarrying activities beneath natural ground level as possible, and that just gives all the benefits you'd expect from visual to noise. Those are actually the primary ones. So the longer that you stay up on that second terrace, it's undesirable for us. So all of those issues kind of interconnect, let alone the fact that we'd be sterilising 1.4 million tonne of aggregate resources as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions around that, but I guess the point I'm making at the outset is simply that we've investigated avoiding it, and it's just really complex and undesirable for us.
When we were on site, we were on each of the terrace levels, and we understood that this part is this where the settling ponds will be in this corner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, great. It's just making sure I understood exactly where the spot was. Thank you.
So I suppose that's a nice segue really into the stage 3 and trying to provide a little bit more detail around it. And look, thank you very much for making the effort to go out onto site. It does make talking to this a whole lot easier when you can visualise what we're talking about. So from an operational perspective, from my perspective, obviously I can visualise it. So I do accept that it could have been unclear or a bit uncertain. But for us, the controls that we're proposing, stage 3 is no different to stage 1 and 2 for us. The hard limit for us and the hard control is around that 10 hectares of open area. Now, I'd probably want to contrast that at the outset. So Parkburn, that wider area, we did a bit of a desktop Google Maps, and I think Phil referenced it before. Had between sort of that 40 to 50 hectares of open area, it appears from the outset. Now, we're not saying that's inappropriate at all. In fact, I'd take the step to say I think those sites are pretty well run in the scheme of things, particularly in the proximity to easy moorings. But what I am doing is just drawing your attention to the fact that this is a much smaller scale. The open area that we're talking about here is quite a lot smaller. So that 10 hectares is the hard limit. We can't open up any more land before we've progressively rehabilitated. The other thing I wanted to talk to is the fact that it's not all in chunks. So it's not that you do 10 hectares and then boom, you open up another 10 hectares, or even in terms of the staging that we've identified, it happens much more concurrently and behind that. So we've tried to give a staging plan which makes sense, and it is accurate, but the progressive rehabilitation happens in micro steps or micro stages within that. So to give you an example, an initial stripping campaign for us, it's nowhere near 10 hectares. It might be 1 to 2 hectares that we'd open up initially and progressively move the operation. So really just trying to paint that picture that it is progressive and it's at 100% aligns. Clean fill that comes in is critical to us in terms of rehabilitating and creating profiles. And actually the fact that that's, there's always a trend, but demand of that can even flow as well. That actually helps us create some of those land profiles that have been referenced in the landscape reports, whereas you don't get a uniform approach, you actually get natural variations, which is in keeping with the land holding around it. I did wonder if I try to explain just in really simple terms, the sort of life cycle around, quarrying, stripping, extracting, and then rehabilitating. And you'll see that I've made those points in, point 11 of my summary. So in very simple terms, the first activity we do is we strip the soils from the site. So generally speaking, they'll be around 300 mil. We take that off with an excavator and dump trucks. You can use scrapers and other machinery, but we tend to like using excavators and dump trucks because you can essentially protect the soil. We want to use that soil to turn the land back into productive uses after we've been there. So we take that off to start with, and in the initial stages, we'll stockpile that on site, and we'll probably stockpile it on one of the boundaries either side of those sediment ponds is the likely location. I should say, as we go through, once we get sufficient land open, we don't stockpile anymore. When you strip land from one area and take the topsoil, you're rehabilitating the other. So the stockpiling for asking topsoil initially is only whilst you're getting the quarry established. So once the topsoil is removed, we essentially try to get ourselves 10 to 12 metres below ground level, and we extract via loader. So essentially we're trying to get ourselves below natural ground level as fast as possible and to create a footprint there. So, and you'll see that as well, because this site is quite deep, those extraction lifts or extraction strips are 10 to 12 metres at a time. So you go through at 12 metres and then you come back with your batter and take another 10 to 12 metres as you go. So while that's happening, and when you get to a point where you've essentially fully extracted an area, we use clean filling to help create those rehab profiles. And by and large, you identify one of the upper points of extraction and begin to push clean fill over the top. So it's not at actual ground level, it's always at least 10 metres below, but it typically is from a high point, and that's just because it's operationally easy to push downhill than try to push uphill with the machines. And then, so once we've got that profile from clean fill, we then take the topsoil that I was talking about and respread it so it turn it back into productive land. So it is very much an integrated process. And as I say, stage 3, whilst we've painted that picture, which hopefully makes sense to you, in essence, the controls and the process is no different to stage 1 and 2. I guess the last point that I'd make is just in and around our proposed maximum extraction rate of 720,000 tonne a year. It maybe seems like a bit of a random number in terms of 720,000, but really what we've tried to do, and the point I want to make is that it's not a forecast of demand. Yes, we've done some work trying to forecast what demand looks like over 10, 20, 30 years. This is not that. What this is doing is trying to establish what we think is an appropriate rate of extraction with the footprint, with the controls that we're proposing today. So it's very much been built up from our independent experts and the considerations for the site. So just wanted to provide some context around how we got to that number as well.
Thank you.
Okay, that's probably all I had. Happy for questions.
Great, thank you. I'll check to see if we have any questions for you from the panel.
Yeah, I have a question. In the management plan, and I'm referring to page 6, which is the 3.2 roles and responsibilities. There's, I can get there if I mention. And it's the second to last paragraph on, yes, your page 6, I think it is, on that management plan.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, so in there, it refers to if there is a need to temporarily remove established environmental protection measures and goes on, and then says permanent removal. Can you explain how that actually would apply? And I guess an example, because I'm trying to figure out how you would be permanent removing of a control measure from an environmental perspective.
So, so there's a few things, probably where I'll start with that is that the point of that area is making sure that all of our team know they're responsible for adopting, our environmental conditions essentially. The one example I could think of, and this is very much off the top of my head when you asked that question, but if we had, one of the shelter belt trees that were dying or didn't creep, replacing that. It's technically, it's temporary, it's best practice, but it would be those types of temporary acts that would be referring to. Anything larger, and that's why we've put the core environmental planner in there. Anything that triggers compliance issues, consents or the plan, that has to go around our environmental planner for discussion at that point.
Okay. Thank you. And I've got a couple of questions in relation to this. So the short-term emergency works. How did you get to 600 truck movements on that? Just as how did you get to that? Is that based on other quarries, or is it demand that you've seen previously?
That was very much, it was actually a bit of an integrated approach there as well. What we're trying to do is acknowledge that there are some short-term infrastructure works that benefit from us operating load out only outside of traditional processing hours. But they are infrequent. So what we wanted to do actually, in essence, if you multiply, I think, in consultation with the noise expert, in particular, if you multiply them out, you actually get to a much larger number than 600. But what we've wanted to do is go, actually, that's not reasonable. It's that the number looks a bit scary. So let's actually just pick it back to something we think is reasonable. So whilst there's been some science behind it, I suppose it's a representative of us trying to pin that number back to something that is quite small in the scheme of things.
Thank you. But just obviously that was one of the concerns of one of the submitters as well, that, noise outside of the operational hours. And this is the page 8 of your, and this is that 4.1 site consent summary. Does there need to be a limit on clean fill? Is that right? Clean fill?
No. So essentially at the moment, the truck movements or the proposed truck movements would actually be the restraint for the clean fill volume. So we haven't identified a tonnes per year or annual for that, but they are limited by the truck movements that we're fitted for.
Okay, and how about from outside of the quarry itself? So clean fill coming from outside of the
Oh, sorry, that's actually what I was referring to.
Oh, yeah, okay, cool, thank you. That's it, okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, on the plans, that there's a paper road that's noted, and we'll need, I'm just looking at the location of that coming from the state highway boundary through. You've got shelter belt planting proposed that goes through that road. Can you talk me through what the road is and where it goes and whose land that joins?
So we own on both sides of that paper road. You can't tell it's a road, but yes, it's legally there.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So that's another reason why we stayed away from that area. It just created a bit more complexity. But yes, we own both sides of that.
To be clear, Commissioner, no planting is proposed on the Legal Road, but there's existing planting. That being detail. Did you want to do that?
Yeah, the latest site plan, which is attached to my supplementary evidence, it's also submitted elsewhere. So that's the one with, you can see various types of planting on it, and the most recently added planting is shown in purple on it. Yeah, so
That road, as I understand it, the the local, does it?
Well, the purple is shown there is going through. Although immediately adjacent to the purple, to the south of it, you can see a green shelter belt that's proposed to be retained. So that's off the paper road. The purple shelter belt has been proposed later on through discussions with Gravelly Gully. And so that's to take the place of that existing shelter belt and continue it along in the event that the shelter belt that's currently on the legal road gets removed. So, yeah, you're right. Exactly where it crosses the legal road, you might be planting.
Right.
There'll be access through there. But nonetheless, that will sort of take the place of the one that's currently on the paper road.
Just for more context there, it's a good question because that's actually what the neighbours asked us, the WISEs that are immediately adjacent to us. So that was actually one of the drivers for that second row of plantings, is that it would be on our land. So they were worried about what happens if that road got legitimised and risk of planting. So that gave them confidence, obviously, to say sign the improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you. So your evidence in chief at paragraph 23. So I had a question down here. So you've stated here that the Fulton Hogan's Parkburn Quarry is subject to a fast track application to rezone its current quarry for urban development. And then you have stated that that illustrates the competing land use issue and likely to place further strain on the regions. And my question was, to what extent that proposal or that Parkburn Quarry would have already depleted the aggregate before they develop any residential. So in a sense, I guess what I'm getting at is you're using that as an example for why you need to be here, but I'm unclear whether aggregate is getting taken away from that site in terms of not being able to be used if it's residential. Does that make sense to
Yes,
you?
it does.
Yeah. What were you meaning there? I just want to be clear.
No, so if we take a step back at the highest levels, and we have this throughout New Zealand, actually, it's called Aggregate Quarry Association doing our behalf. Quarries inherently are under, I suppose, strain from competing land uses, quite often residential in nature. And so what happens is it sterilises quarry land. If you're too close to neighbours, obviously it's undesirable, either from a consenting authority perspective or from a quarry operator perspective. And so that's common everywhere. And that's one of the reasons we really like this site, actually, is because it is well protected from even generational shifts in land use and the like. All I was doing there actually is just highlighting the fact that even existing quarries are actually different land uses proposed for them, which just further illustrates this point.
So more a general point
Yeah.
around that pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
What I can say is that quarry already has been rezoned through Plan Change 21.
Yes.
So the fast track process is a variation on that, but it's already zoned for residential.
Yes, and they're doubling.
Yes.
They're proposing to double it.
Yes.
So it's already, yeah. Okay.
But the operator of that quarry will exit it tomorrow to develop a residential.
Yes. 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 Okay. Thank you.
Whether they do or not, is entirely.
Okay, thank you. Paragraph 26. Here you're talking about a contribution to the market. And I was interested in hearing from you in terms of the contribution or your experience with emergency works. Like what kind of, describe kind of your experience with emergency works in the district.
So is that in terms of emergency work provisions as they relate to after hours quarry use, or just in general?
Just in general, just some context on how the material is used in the district.
quite often emergency works, is related to flooding and washouts of roads and infrastructure and the like. And obviously from the aggregate that we produce, is in its bulk form, can be used to build up roads and help stabilise slips, but also it's used for concrete. So any concrete production used for foundations or stabilising measures. The same with the sealing chip for the road, asphalt for the road. So that's probably the easiest thing to visualise, which I'm sure everyone in the room's experienced. Washouts, slips, those types of things are probably what you call common emergency uses.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We did have a question when we were on site around, and this is something that we'll probably talk to Mr. Vivian about from the planning perspective, but from the site ownership perspective, we observed that there were some what looked to be like stone wall ruins on the site.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And they appear to be fenced.
Yes.
And we just wondered what, your thoughts on those and whether you had any intentions with them. I acknowledge that there's no heritage overlay, but it did raise a point of curiosity for us. Are they of any significance to you?
So there's a few ways we probably get similar thoughts to you. So they're fenced off. We intend on continuing to leave them fenced off. They are part of the non-operational area, and in fact part of that the exclusion zone that we've proposed. So essentially we've guaranteed through this process, if it's adopted, that we won't be going to
Thank you.
Actually, Kerry makes a good point. That is actually one of the reasons why we didn't favour an access road that went around the top and down the bottom.
Because of that. Yeah. And do you know anything about the walls or?
I don't
No.
actually. No, I've asked a lot of questions actually, but there's not a lot of information on it.
Okay, great. Well, that's any further questions? No, that's all of our questions. Thank you. That's been very helpful to hear from you. Thank you. And have a good birthday again. I couldn't let you go without saying it again. Now it's Mr. Page, it's 20 to 11.
Yes.
We had scheduled morning tea. Would this be a good time?
It would be an excellent time.
Excellent. Okay, so if we it's 10:39, so 10:30. We'll come back at 11. That will give everyone a chance to get a cuppa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. We'll resume the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on our team is noise expert, Mr. Gary Walton. So Gary, would you like to introduce yourself and present a short summary of the highlights of your evidence, please?
Yes, hello. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, so I, as Mr. Poach said, Gary Walton from Marshall Day Acoustics in Christchurch. My company undertook measurements and modelling to inform the resource consent application. So yes, I won't obviously take you through my evidence word for word, but just give you a quick sort of summary of the key points as I see them. I think in terms of the measurements, our ambient noise surveys indicated that the environment in the area is predominantly influenced by road traffic noise and, from the surrounding state highways. Road traffic was the primary contributor to the measured average ambient noise levels, with lower levels observed during the brief lulls in traffic. Okay, the calculations and modelling. I won't repeat the full details of the how the quarrying will be done. I think you've already heard from Mr. Johnston this morning. I think probably the key thing I've tried to convey sort of in my evidence is that the noise emissions will vary greatly over time. It's obviously a very long-term project. So the modelling can only ever be sort of a snapshot of different points in the lifespan of the quarry. And obviously we've tried to pick a few points where we think those sort of worst case combinations will likely occur, but obviously that's I think potentially sometimes people can sort of look at those numbers and look at the noise contours in our reports and that sort of thing and just assume that that is the value the whole time. And so I just wanted to, I suppose, reinforce that that's not the 365-day a year effect. That is just the worst case effect at that point in time. The modelled or calculated noise levels are significantly influenced by the use of the processing plant, so the crushing and screening plant. And I do note that doesn't operate all of the time. I think only operates less than half of the year. So again, not necessarily a all day, everyday effect from that perspective. The highest calculated noise levels when the processing plant is operating at any dwelling is 45 dB LAEQ. That's well below the 55 dB LA10, slight difference in parameter, but still kind of the average noise level we're comparing effectively. Daytime noise limit in the district plan. I would sort of highlight that 10 decibels there is a significant difference in level. The decibel scale is not particularly intuitive, unfortunately. So I think normally we would say something in the order of sort of 1 to 2 decibels as an imperceptible change, 3 to 4 decibels sort of maybe a just perceptible change. But then by the time we get up to sort of 10 decibels, that's half as loud sort of subjectively. So it's a lot less sound energy in total. So I think in this context, considering the scale of those predicted worst case noise levels against the district plan noise limits, I consider any effects will be minimal from the typical sort of daytime operating main core activities, I suppose. Obviously, there's also a nighttime component to this proposal, as we're aware, but that is limited to vehicle movements and load out activities. So crucially, not having use of that processing plant and those other sort of higher noise generating activities on site. I think in that regard, I'd consider vehicle noise sort of not to be dissimilar to the intermittent traffic on the state highway network, and certainly not in terms of character of sort of the odd vehicle every now and then. So in terms of those nighttime effects, I also don't expect that to result in any disturbance effects. And I think I've also been through the Section 42A reports, and I've read the advice of the council's acoustic expert, Mr. Exeter. There doesn't appear to be any issues of contention between us, as far as I understand. Mr. Exeter provided some draft conditions in his advice, and I agree that those conditions are a reasonable basis, and I think they are aligned with what's ultimately put forth as the applicant's sort of current set of draft conditions. So I'm comfortable that those will be appropriate to kind of control the scale of the activity to what is proposed. I think those are all of my sort of key points, really. So happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. I'll just see if we have any questions from the panel for you.
Yeah, hi, Ms. Walton.
Morning.
In your summary, you refer, and this is that which starts with noise from the quarry received at the dwellings. Can you please help me to understand how the quarrying activity, when it is up and running, is going to be less than what the ambient noise already registered on site? If I would have read that correctly, that statement is going to be less in the first instance.
Yes, I think it's very sort of difficult to obviously make very generalized statements about noise effect, and particularly noise audibility over that entire many decade period. I think generally speaking, obviously in terms of how we measure the average noise level and average noise effects over, for example, a 1 hour basis or an 8 hour basis over the daytime period, whatever the appropriate time averaging sort of time frame is in that particular instance. That's obviously road traffic noise is a significant factor in the environment, and all of the sort of key receiver locations, the traffic noise levels are already sort of at or above those levels of quarry activity. So it's not, and they're not significantly far above it that it would mean quarry activity couldn't be heard necessarily over those noise levels. And maybe in some cases, maybe not. Obviously, it depends on the exact receiver location. I think probably the key thing I've have pointed out in my evidence as well is that obviously traffic noise on those highways isn't entirely continuous. It is obviously over a long enough averaging period. It's effectively continuous. There's a lot of traffic on those roads, but obviously there are lulls in traffic over short periods, which might be sort of, I don't know, 1 to 2 minutes here and there in the daytime. And the results of our ambient noise measurements are that the noise level is much lower during those traffic lulls. So I think that's when the level of quarry activity would potentially be a bit more prominent for some receivers. And I think that's primarily on those processing days. I think generally on the non-processing days, the noise levels are quite a bit lower, and I think will probably be around about the same level of audibility as some of those more distant traffic movements on the highway network. Whereas I think potentially where you've got traffic lulls during peak activity days, as per what we've modelled, I think that's quarry noise would be likely to be audible for the closest receivers at those times.
So the two lots of noise, the ambient noise, and noting from the existing road use, and the potential for the quarry noise, they don't join together as such to make a higher level, or is it just sit side by side?
It's a very good question. In terms of how it's assessed to the district plan limits or activity noise limits, no, they are completely distinct. There's no sort of cumulative assessment there. Obviously, in reality, if you're standing there measuring or listening in the field, you are measuring that total noise level, and then it's obviously that's, I suppose, where our technical expertise comes in to sort of separate those two aspects of noise. But I think, again, in terms of those sort of real world effects there, the vehicle noise component of the proposed activity is sort of sufficiently low that it wouldn't add to the existing vehicle noise on the road. And then the processing plant sort of component of the noise from the site is distinct from character from the road traffic noise. It's sort of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the type of plant that's proposed, but it typically makes a sort of a shushing noise, I suppose, and sort of almost like a steam train or something might be a sort of comparison. So in that sense, it's not additive to the road traffic noise because it's a different character.
Thank you. Just when we were on site, we noticed, because it was quite a still day, so we noticed there was bird scarers somewhere in the distance. I didn't know where the bird scarers were, and they were really, you could actually hear, admittedly, they were very short bursts of time, but you could hear that from time to time as they were going on. So it's just conscious of that. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. I have a question for you on the proposed conditions of consent that you've also commented on in your evidence. And I'm interested in where they've landed. So if proposed condition of consent 8 relates to the emergency works.
Yes.
Truck movements in association with that. And the condition that we've got in front of us looks quite different from Mr. Exeter's recommendation. And I wondered, are there any remaining disagreements, or is it just that it's been expressed differently?
No, I don't. I think it's probably just a difference of expression. Sorry, I don't have Mr. Exeter's in front of me. I do have the applicant's conditions. I think it's probably been expressed quite differently would be the
Yeah.
the easiest answer there in terms of the key thing, I suppose, that we acousticians are sort of really worried about are those short-term noise effects over an hour period, for example, on any given night. So that's where we have those controls of 2-4 vehicles in an hour. And
Yes,
there,
so sorry to interrupt, the condition that Mr. Exeter put forward, or a recommendation at least, was that heavy vehicle movements for emergency work that is outside standard operating hours must not exceed 500 in any calendar year on weeknights and 100 in any calendar year on Sundays and public holidays. And then he says there must be no more than one heavy vehicle movement, which equates to one vehicle in and one vehicle out in any 15-minute period between 10 and 7 on any day. And it just seems that has changed somewhat in the condition put forward. Is that something you can comment on there? Or is that more a question for Mr. Vivian in terms of?
Yeah, I think possibly might be more appropriate for Mr. Vivian to address that. Yeah, my understanding obviously that the applicant's conditions had obviously put forward a limit on that number per calendar year, and I think as Mr. Johnston alluded to earlier, that was sort of something that ultimately came out of our initial discussions in terms of if we were to just have a limit on events per hour, per night, whatever, that doesn't really control necessarily, it doesn't constrain that scale of effect in the sense that they could do that every night in terms of what the conditions would allow. So I think I was more comfortable with something to some kind of annual cap on that to kind of reflect that intention that this isn't necessarily the every night situation. It is just for those sort of exceptional works. So I think in terms of the specific number of that annual cap, I think obviously the 500 and 600 is in about the same place. So I'm comfortable from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. And that's any further questions? No, that's all our questions of you, Mr. Walton. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Introduce Mr. Reuben Morrison, who's our ecologist. Reuben, would you like to introduce yourself and summarise the key points of where you and Mr. Harding have landed?
Yep, sure thing. Good morning, commissioners. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. My name's Reuben Morrison. I'm an ecologist and director of Restore NZ Limited. I was engaged to provide ecological input by the applicant for this project. My initial role was to undertake a high-level assessment of the ecological values present and surrounding the proposed quarry site. Through that work, I identified quite a range of different values, including vegetation in the central gully, the plantation forestry, freshwater habitats, which included the stream and the wetland, as well as a range of fauna that may be present. As the project progressed, the scope of my work then expanded further. So this included further eDNA sampling within the stream, and through that we identified a faint signal for a non-migratory galaxid species, which is a fish species. And in response to that, the project design was then refined to include the proposed installation of a low hedge barrier to fish passage to protect the upstream populations. That's quite a unique proposal, and it's not a very common one, and it has quite a lot of conservation benefit associated with it. So that entire aspect of the proposal was done in very close consultation with the Department of Conservation. I also developed a wetland enhancement and planting regime to improve the ecological outcomes within the wetland area. And then as the project progressed through the consenting process, I undertook further detailed assessment, which included an impact assessment in response to an RFI from ORC, and additional terrestrial vegetation survey in response to Mr. Harding, which I largely outlined in my peer review response document. As part of that response, I undertook detailed survey within the central gully, identifying down to the individual indigenous plant within the and adjacent to the proposed access route. And with that data, I then worked with the project's design team to substantially refine the access road alignment through a very iterative process in which we've now largely avoided and then minimized effects on higher value vegetation, as well as areas that I identified as potential lizard habitat as far as possible. So my primary brief of evidence, which was dated on the 9th of April, that summarized the work that I've just outlined, and it set out my overall position, which aligned quite closely with Mr. Anderson's Section 42A report. I then prepared a supplementary evidence in response to Mr. Harding's evidence, which I believe came through on the 13th of April and was dated the 9th of April. While his evidence definitely adopts a more conservative position in some areas, I have outlined in my supplementary evidence multiple aspects where I think that we are aligned in the overall management approach. I think the main point of difference relates to how ecological significance within the central gully is interpreted and what that means for the assessment of effects in this proposal. So my position is that while ecologically significant values are present in the wider gully, the proposed works have been refined to avoid higher value features, and the remaining effects are very limited and can be appropriately managed through the proposed measures. I do note that Mr. Harding's assessment places weight on classifying the gully as Indigenous vegetation in its entirety. And I don't necessarily disagree with that at a broad classification scale. But what my assessment does is it focuses on the specific vegetation actually affected by the proposed works footprint. So for context, the gully does contain Indigenous species, but it's largely dominated by exotic grass cover, which is something Mr. Harding and I are in agreement on. And my assessment has subsequently focused on identifying and avoiding those higher value Indigenous components by design. I have set out the reasoning for my position in my evidence, including the detailed survey that I did, the design refinement that me and the design team did, as well as an application of the effects management hierarchy. Overall, I do remain of the position that the proposal represents a really well considered and multidisciplinary design. And I think that ecological effects can be appropriately managed through the measures that have been proposed. I think there is the potential for positive ecological effects over time through the combination, and that's an important aspect here, is the combination of all the various proposed restoration and enhancement measures, provided those are guided by an ecological management plan. And that essentially summarizes where I'm sitting right now, but I'd be very happy to answer any questions that I'm sure you guys have.
Thank you, Mr. Rorison. I have some questions for you. At paragraph 12, you're talking about, this is of your supplementary. You address here the legal covenanting, and in your opinion, it's not required to a level where offsetting or compensation would trigger that. And my question is for you, what would be the threshold for including a covenant, theoretically?
Well, I want to distinguish between the threshold for including a covenant and the threshold for including offsetting or compensation, because I wouldn't necessarily revert straight to covenants as being the only solution here.
Yes.
But we work through the effects management hierarchy, so avoiding, minimizing, and then remediating. And so if we have tried our absolute best to do each three of those steps sequentially, and after doing our best to remediate effects, we find that the effects on Indigenous vegetation are still going to be more than minor, that is when we then have to try and mitigate effects through offsetting and then compensation.
And when you say those remaining effects are effects that are more than minor, is that the same as residual effects?
Yes. Yes, so
Thank you.
the way that I like to apply my effects is I'll assess what the effect actually is, and then we will do our best to remediate it, which lands you on a residual effect. And if that residual effect is more than minor, then it triggers compensation.
Yes, great. Okay, thank you. Thanks for talking us through that. That's always helpful. It's quite an involved legislative guidance, isn't it? That affects management hierarchy. In terms of Mr. Page pointed to condition 13I that he submitted in any case would ensure that no Indigenous vegetation clearance was permitted through the Central Gully. Are you comfortable with that condition?
Yeah, I am, because not necessarily just because of that reason, but in a few of my projects locally where we've done enhancement planting, that's additional positive. And so that's where the fencing sits within this one. I've put that additional fence in, and the client's actually volunteered that as an additional measure. I don't think that sits strictly within their effects management. And where a client volunteers something as additional, I'm often quite comfortable that the provisions for vegetation clearance within the district plan already to a large extent protect a lot of our Indigenous vegetation. And I think putting a condition on top of that just further would protect it. And I think if we talk in terms of scale of what the impact is that we're looking at here, I think that that's sufficient.
Thank you. So in that sense, you're saying it's a positive measure and it's being offered rather than required for effect on an effects basis. Okay, thank you.
I outlined in my evidence the amount of plants that are going to end up approximately being on that remediated road. And I think if we put that in terms of the number of shrubs that are going to be impacted, that the remediation of that farm track itself is sufficient to be the actual remediation under the effects management hierarchy. Everything else can be included in our overall assessment of what the overall effect is, because those measures proposed by the client will ultimately be conditioned. But like I said, I think that it just sits as an additional positive offered by the client at this point.
Thank you. And one final question from me at paragraph 33. Here you're talking about positive ecological measures that extend beyond Mr. Harding's evidence, including the proposed installation of a fish barrier. And so in terms of jurisdiction, can we consider the fish barrier a positive effect as part of this consent process if it's part of the ORC jurisdiction?
I mean, that's my job. I'm an ecologist. I have to consider all of the different ecological grounds and how they interact with each other. And so I think a lot of what I've ended up doing in the back half of this consent is arguing, or not arguing, but trying to talk within one specific realm, and we're not thinking about ecology as a whole. So if we did land on compensation, one thing I would be looking at doing is just talking about the actual benefit associated with this fish barrier that's going in, because from an ecology perspective, that is a big positive, and I think that's not been given as much attention as it deserves.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, and it's probably more a question for Mr. Vivian in any event, but I was just interested in your view there. Thank you. I'll just check if we've got any further questions for you from the panel.
I have a question, but it may be more designed with Mr. Page in mind, but it is in light of the gully.
Yeah.
So
I can do my best. We'll see.
Yeah.
So considering that the land, we're talking about the the gully as a whole, half of that gully is not owned by the applicant. So are we straying into any property law implications where we're dealing with land that's not actually part of the application? I accept that there is the easement over the land, but we're talking about land outside the applicant's
So
responsibility.
personally, I don't know where the boundaries sit, and so that kind of aspect does sit within this page. But from my perspective, I don't deal with legal boundaries and things like that. I just deal with what's being conditioned, what is going to happen, and what is the overall ecological effect that we're talking about here. And so regardless of whose property it sits on, from my perspective, I've just looked at where the road is going, what's inside that road, and then what is the client going to be obligated to do by condition in order to mitigate that.
Thank you, thank you. That perhaps is something we can return to with Mr. Page at some point during the process today. Thank you for that. Any further questions for Mr. Rorison? Thank you for your time today, Mr. Rorison. That concludes our questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Page, we are ready for your next witness when you are.
Just making a note of Commissioner Patterson's question, so that I don't miss it when I reply.
Certainly. Is that something you can return to today or?
Oh, yes, I will.
Oh, great.
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you.
I think I know the answer already, but I want to just check some plans first. And thank you, Ruben. I think that deals with everybody who's online. And so, next up, being kind, ask you to, I should put up another chair, so I can control the front table next to me. So, Logan, would you like to introduce yourself and briefly address the main points of your assessment?
Sure thing. Morning, commissioners. So my name is Logan Franklin, the Institute for Road Medals. I have a brief summary of my evidence here, which I'll talk to. Thank you for being provided a copy of that.
Yes, we have.
Okay. So I'll keep it fairly brief and then take questions. So my evidence focuses around transport effects of the road medals proposed to establish and operate a gravel quarry at 2004 Logan Cromwell Road, access from the same road. I was the principal author of the transport assessment, which has been reviewed and accepted by New Zealand Transport Agency, subject to conditions. State Highway 6 at the site accesses a rural two-lane, two-way state highway carrying approximately 3,300 vehicles per day, 8% of which are heavy vehicles. Crash data for the past 5 years shows no fatal or serious crashes near the site and no crashes related to turning movements or access. In my opinion, there are no pre-existing crash trends or safety issues in the vicinity of the site. So the quarry, as Mr. Johnson was talking today, will be developed in stages and traffic generation will increase gradually over time in line with that. I've assessed the transport effects based on the maximum foreseeable quarry output, representing a conservative worst case scenario. At the busiest hour, based on road medals assumptions, the site will generate around 15 vehicle arrivals with in an hour, with only around 5 right turns into the site per hour, which is very low at roughly 1 vehicle every 12 minutes. The access to the site will be via an upgraded intersection designed to NZTA diagram E standards. I did provide a copy of that in my evidence in chief, but in summary, what that is shoulder widening on both sides of the highway to allow space for vehicles to pass a vehicle that's turning right into the site and shoulder space for vehicles turning into the site without obstructing through traffic. So site distance requirements are met in both directions. And the access design, including the assumptions in terms of traffic numbers, have been formally approved by NZTA, as they've provided the original approval. So the primary transport effect associated with this project is on the state highway, and the Road Control Authority is comfortable with those. So beyond the site access, the additional traffic represents a small increase in daily and hourly flows on State Highway 6. And in my opinion, State Highway 6 is appropriately designed to accommodate the quarry's heavy vehicle movements. So the key, the primary effect in my view is likewise around the intersection design, which has been appropriately designed, subject to conditions, and beyond that, the flows on the highway are high enough that the transport effects will not be significant from a wider network point of view. In terms of compliance with the transport rules in the district plan, the proposal generally complies with those. There's one non-compliance, which relates to the existing access to a property on the opposite side of the road, which is within a setback distance of 200 metres. We've assessed the effects of that, and because it's very low volume, the existing access, and noting there's enough space to accommodate the intersection design, the effects of that non-compliance are acceptable. So in conclusion, the quarry can operate safely and efficiently from a transport perspective. Traffic effects are modest. Access design is fit for purpose and approved by NZTA as the Road Control Authority, and the transport effects of the proposal are acceptable and, in my view, appropriately managed.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. I'll check if we have any questions for you.
Yes, on page 2 of your report, you talk about applying a general growth factor of 1.89%. Can you just tell me where you got that figure from, please?
Sure. So when we do transport assessments, we don't just look at the traffic flows now, we look at what's going to happen in the next few years. And so what we did is we normally plan 10 years out from the point of when we do our report. So a key part of that is traffic growth on the highway, which is increasing with growth, and we refer to that as background traffic. So we had reviewed prior traffic data over, I think it was 3 years leading up to that point, and then we had extrapolated that out into the future. So we assumed that typical growth rate would continue. Right.
Okay, thank you. And so in the emails with NZTA, this is, I think, page 4. It refers to stage 3 requires the vehicle crossing to be upgraded to an intersection standard, which includes infrastructure, which does not allow overtaking. What did they mean by infrastructure? Just so that I've got that clear what infrastructure means.
So take a step back, that was referring to stage 3, that it needed to be designed an intersection.
Yeah.
We've actually, through discussion with brokers, we're actually doing the full
Upfront
thing up front, because it doesn't make sense to come in and then redo it, everyone gets grumpy with that on the road network. So the infrastructure that's referred to in that email, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was, we had discussed potentially including essentially yellow lines so that people don't overtake. But that was decided not to, Bruce, so we're not doing that because it was agreed that that wasn't necessary and that can be reviewed.
Okay, and the other question I have is, and just so I'm clear, when we are talking about the movement, and I know there's some different, whether it's just a mistake or there's talk about truck movements and truck and trailer movements. And is there a difference as far as working for the road side of things and for as in truck movements? Does it constitute something different between a truck and trailer?
Not for the purposes of my assessment. If you had that many truck movements or that many truck and trailer movements, the conclusions are different. The only thing that would be different would be the geometric design of the axis, because truck and trailer unit obviously takes up more room than a truck, the rigid truck, so it require different radius for getting that down to the site. But the short answer, no.
So can you confirm that the radius will be designed for truck and trailer?
Yes, I can confirm that because that, yes.
Any questions? Sorry? What's that? Sarah? No? Okay. Okay, no questions from me, Mr. Copeland. That was all very clear. And thank you for your help today.
I'll leave it. Give you the space.
Thanks very much.
That brings us to the landscape evidence from Mr. Eastby. Mr. Eastby, I know you probably know everybody here already, but would you like to introduce yourself and summarise your evidence, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I was engaged to do a landscape and visual effects assessment report that formed part of the application. And then following that, I've done a brief of evidence and then a supplementary brief of evidence. Thought it might be useful just to go through quickly the chronology of that, because there's been a fair bit of assessment and reporting done between myself and Hannah, Ms. Wilson. So first of all, we had my report, which was part of the application. Then we had Ms. Wilson's peer review of that report. And that peer review largely agrees with the original report, although it identifies a moderate adverse effect in relation to landscape character and landscape values. So not a visual effect, but a moderate effect nonetheless. And in her peer review, Ms. Wilson suggested some conditions, and they've been adopted by the applicant. Then we had my brief of evidence, which reported on and considered a suite of amendments that have been made to the application since it was originally lodged. Then we had Ms. Wilson's evidence. Ms. Wilson's evidence was circulated very quickly after my evidence, so it didn't take account of the amendments and so on that are discussed in my evidence. Having said that, again, Ms. Wilson recommended some conditions in her evidence, and they've been adopted by the applicant as well. Then we had my supplementary evidence, which is a bit of a sum up, if you like. So I thought it might be useful to go to a couple of little bits of my supplementary evidence. Firstly, maybe my paragraph 5, which talks about, well, it gives a brief summary of the amendments that have been made to the application since the original landscape assessment work was done. So, well, I might just read that paragraph. As set out in my evidence in chief, a number of amendments have been made to the application since the time of Ms. Wilson's peer review. These include additional shelter belt plantings to further contain the site that Ms Wilson comments on, the ecological restoration area on the southwestern escarpment, the inclusion of the indicative cross sections to direct the finishing landform, maximum excavation depths being stated, the inclusion of a plan showing 4 stages of excavation and rehabilitation of what was stage 3, and then the adoption of the conditions that are recommended by Ms Wilson and the section 42 report. So that briefly is the amendments that have been made. Also, there's been adoption of some recommended conditions to do with ground profile and lighting and things like that. So then ultimately, by the time we get to the end of my supplementary, just skipping through to my last couple of paragraphs, I consider the issues raised by Ms Wilson's peer review and her evidence have been addressed by the various amendments to the application that are described in my evidence and further by the matters discussed in this evidence, being the adoption of her suggested conditions on lighting, the incorporation of her suggested landscape management conditions into the quarry management plan. Mr. Delaney can give more details about proposed set of conditions there. So it's agreed between Ms Wilson and myself that the visual effects range up to being below moderate degree at most, being the effect on some users of the Lockwood traffic. Thinking more broadly than visual effects and considering effects on landscape character and values, I consider the amendment proposal now includes comprehensive mitigation such that we can be comfortable these effects are below degree. So effectively, in a nutshell, how I arrive at those considerations is through the specific landscape that we're talking about here. It's not an outstanding natural landscape. It's not a significant amenity landscape. It's what the district plan describes as another rural landscape. Still a very pleasant landscape, but it's a landscape that includes modification of occupation and other quarries. So there's the specifics of the landscape, and then there's the specifics, of the proposal itself, which include the various mitigation measures that have been adopted along the way of the process. So that's where I arrive at, answering the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Esfee. I have a couple of questions for you in relation to your evidence in chief. Have you got that in front of you?
Yes.
So in page, paragraph 47 and 48, you discuss duration and uncertainty of effects and the concept of cumulative effects. And I would find it helpful if you were to just talk us through that. Mr. Page has obviously raised it from a legal perspective, and no doubt Mr. Vivian will talk to us from a planning lens, but from a landscape perspective, what's your experience with those matters in your work and as they relate to this proposal?
Yeah, well, in relation to duration, I guess what I'm saying in paragraph 47 there is that what's more important than duration in terms of landscape visual effects probably is what's happening at any given time. And we've got a suite of conditions here that limit what can happen at any given time and that provide mitigation measures to do with it. So from my perspective, if we're talking about one of the important conditions, I suppose, is this maximum of exposed ground being 10 hectares. And that 10 hectares, of course, doesn't just include quarry operation, it includes land that is being rehabilitated. So in total, any disturbance will be 10 hectares as a maximum.
Yeah.
Mitigation of that operation is what's important. Whether that trucks along around the site and continues for 30 years, 40 years, probably doesn't make much difference. It's the effects at any given time that's more important in terms of landscape.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of cumulative effects, I heard what Mr. Page said there this morning, and in my paragraph 48, you've gone to, I've got a citation there from Te Tangatamana, the Landscape Architects Institute guidance, and it echoes what Mr. Page was saying, and I believe that citation actually talks about the Dye case that Mr. Page talked about as well, which is the various aspects of an individual proposal combined they're not cumulative effects, they're just the effects of the proposal.
Mm,
Cumulative effects in terms of landscape arise when we consider a particular type of proposal combining with others of the same type that are already in the landscape.
mm,
So you often get ones such as a wind farm in the landscape that already has 5 wind farms.
yes,
That's a cumulative effect.
yes.
But combinations of different aspects of one proposal is not.
Thank you. And so in this environment, there are other quarries. You have considered the existence of those in your assessment, and you're not concerned by any cumulative impact of more than this quarry being in that environment.
Effectively, you're correct. Yes, that's right. I mean, but the existence of quarries in this landscape show us that quarries aren't something that you don't expect in a rural landscape.
Yes.
But they're far enough away, or no one will experience them together and experience them.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that. And I did have one question. Ms. Wilson's peer review talked about the viewing audience and included users or views from the paper road.
Yes.
And I couldn't recall whether that had been addressed in the resulting report since that time. Is that something you can talk to me about?
Yes, we did consider that in the original landscape assessment, and that's right, Ms. Wilson raised in her peer review in discussing that assessment. And that's something that's evolved a bit as we've gone along, and it's to do with, well, the evolution of that has been to do with the Gravelly Gully submission.
Yes.
And as Commissioner Brown raised, to do with planting beside that paper road.
Yes.
So, in the event that paper road is ever formed as some sort of access way, people going along that paper road will experience an impact. Yes, they will. And that's been further mitigated. Of course, they are separated from the quarrying activity by an escarpment that will remain there. And then, as we've heard, the quarrying activity, of course, even for their own purposes, wants to get down below existing ground level as soon as they can. So people are quite separated from it on that paper road, but if it ends up being some sort of cycleway or something, people will be aware there's an activity there.
Yes, yes. And so in terms of the scale of effects, what would be your conclusion on that particular?
Well, I've said a low degree of effect ultimately with the medications.
Thank you. Okay, I did, turning to your supplementary evidence. You have, let's see, I think you were talking to some conditions. I'll just bring it up again. It dropped off my screen somehow, excuse me. Oh, yes. So at paragraph 6 of your supplementary, there's a number of Roman numeral matters that relate to conditions. Would you be able to just talk through those points while the conditions are in front of us so that we're extra clear?
Yes, certainly. I probably can't necessarily refer to the exact condition, or not able to. So those Roman numeral points in my paragraph 6, those are issues which Ms. Wilson has recommended be dealt with the landscape management plan.
Yes, that's correct.
And I agree that's a good idea, but as we go through the proposed conditions, we already have this quarry management plan that the applicant has produced prior to any work, and also has to update at least every 5 years.
Yes.
They can update it quicker than that, you can't update it slowly. So in thinking about how conditions would work, and in discussions with Mr. Vivian, we felt it would be more efficient to combine Ms. Wilson's proposed points into the quarry management plan. So firstly, it's the rehabilitation actions and objectives to assimilate the final landfill back into the landscape. And so If that was a point in the quarry management plan, then each 5 years, the applicant would have to give a commentary on that.
Yes.
And it looks like it's Mr. Vivian's.
Is that ten C
C.
CA?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Plant lists and implementation methods. Well, as Mr. Morrison was saying, he has done work in this regard, and certainly in relation to the wetland area, there's plant lists and densities and what have you. And then there's the ecological management plan that needs to be produced, which will give plant lists and densities and so on as we go along.
Yes,
Final data profiles and contouring and how these will be achieved. Again, in response to Ms. Wilson, indicative cross sections have been provided to show how landform will be rehabilitated and will be finished, which is important. It is a suggestion which should be incorporated. Again, it seems better to do that in quarry management plan if that's going to be updated every 5 years, because you can report on the area that's being rehabilitated as it goes along. We've got detailed staging of the northern upper terrace, which is the stage 3. And so that's the issue that has been, there's now a plan provided for that. And which breaks that area up into 4 subsections. As we've heard, of course, as the quarry goes along, it's not like you finish one section completely and then you start the next one. It moves along together. So again, it seems logical that that's in the quarry management plan.
okay. Thank you. And those, the quarry management plans is now a title, a heading, 10B through 10D. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
And before we depart that subject, can you take panel to the plans attached to your evidence, your primary evidence, and go to the second sheet and point out where you find the final battle profiles and contour that we're talking about just a moment ago?
Yes, so that's the second sheet. We've got, at the top of the second sheet, we've got the access way design. And then below that, we've got 2 sections, section A and section B. Now, the section lines of those sections are actually on the attachment 1 plan. Section A is from the long section right the way through the quarry. Section B is a crosser. So looking at those sections A and section B, the red line shows the excavated surface. So that's when this is being worked. It will be the red line. When it gets finished, it's the green dashed line.
Oh, yes, this is sheet 2.
That's right,
Yeah.
sheet 2.
I see.
So obviously that's indicative, but it's good, in my view, it's good to have that plan as part of the consent because it communicates the intention of the finish. And then the quarry management plan every 5 years will give detail.
Okay. Thank you. Right, I think that concludes our questions of you, Mr. Espy. Everything's very clear. Thank you.
Can I, before we move to Mr. Vivian's evidence, address the question that Commissioner Patterson raised about the gully?
Yes, of course.
And the reason for doing it now is that might give rise to further questions of Mr. Vivian about how we couch the conditions and the extent of them.
Yes.
Now, in order to do this, I need you to have the site plan that's appended to Mr. Espy's supplementary evidence. Because I'm going to speak to that plan and hopefully answer Commissioner Patterson's question. Do you all have that available to you?
Yes, just about. Yes.
Jolly good, right.
Thank you.
So just for orientation purposes, if you are on the Luggett Cromwell Road and you can see that there's 2 locations on that road where it's labelled. If you go to the right-hand one, you can see the black cadastral boundaries under the words Luggett Cromwell.
Yes.
And you can see the road metal site boundary effectively runs down the centre of the gully until it crosses the existing access. And then it dog legs south along the side of the access, existing access along the top of the gully then does about a 45-degree turn and back to the bottom of the gully again. Are we still following?
Yep. Mhm.
And then the cadastral boundary runs along the bottom of the gully on the left side of the cross-hatching area, restoration area, until it intersects with the access road and then carries on the bottom of the gully and then round the bottom of the scarp. Can you see that?
Mhm.
So that's the legal boundary of the road metals property. However, in the legal description of the application site, it includes the Davidson agricultural land. So it is within scope. Now, that's important for two reasons. And probably more than two, but anyway, that's the two I think of here. If you look above the access road, you can see there's a blue area labelled area of proposed wetland restoration. So that is part of the applicant's proposal to you, is that there will be the ecological restoration area. It's not on the road metals land, it's on Davison Ag's land. But there is an agreement in place between Davison Ag and road metals to offer that, and they do. We can also see that there is pink areas shown on that plan, which if you look at the notes, existing access is to be reinstated. So again, those pink areas which are on the existing access tracks, including through the restoration area further down towards the bottom, those are existing access easements. So they're on the Davison Ag land, but they're easements in favour of road metals. So we can offer those too. What is now proposed is the access road, including Mr. Morrison's refinement to the alignment as it crosses the gully. There is currently no registered easement in place for that, but there is agreement in place between the parties to provide that. So again, we can offer it. Now, that's a long-winded way of coming around the question that Commissioner Patterson actually asked, which is about condition 13I, and whether it only relates to the part of the central gully that road metals owns, or whether it also includes the rest of the central gully that Davison Ag owns. The short answer is that road metals has the ability to offer that 13I relates to the whole central gully. And Davison Ag will wear that if it's your decision that that condition meets the necessity test. So we do have the authority to offer that. Even if we didn't, you could certainly impose it in relation to the central gully so far as it's on road metals land. Road metals owns roughly half the gully, Davison Ag owns roughly half the gully. But if it's your view that 13I is important and it relates to the whole gully, then say so, and road metals will sort it out with Davison Ag.
Thank you. And you're not suggesting any change to that condition as currently written?
But if you are anxious that a condition that relates to road metals land interpreted as not relating to the whole gully, then it can be redrafted to make that crystal clear.
Yeah, that could be something that would be helpful, I think, in any reply or revised condition.
Yeah, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
raising it now. I
Yeah.
actually want to raise the drafting of that condition, Mr. Milligan.
Thank you. Any questions on it? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kerry, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself and present a summary?
Thank you. I'm Kerry Vivian, planner, thank you, Queenstown. So I prepared the assessment of effects with the original lodge. That was, I think, in 2024, late 2024. So quite some time ago. I know, just reading the application at the time, Davidson Agriculture Limited actually still owned both the sites, but Road Metals were the applicant. And of course, Davidson Agriculture gave the written approval to the application and forward. So there appears to be, I've produced primary evidence and supplementary evidence. There appears to be quite a close alignment between Mr. Anderson and I in terms of the assessment of a lot of things. The three issues, I guess, are the bond, the duration of the consent, and also stage 3. So yeah, I like Mr. SB, I don't know if Mr. Anderson's responses to those is all here. One point I did just want to raise first is the MPS infrastructure, which I overlooked, and that's partly because the application was made before that had been given effect to. And yeah, it's just an oversight by myself and I'm sure Mr. Anderson as well. But I do want to point the commissioners to policy 5, which, clearly this is infrastructure supporting activity. And it just, as decision makers, you must recognise and provide for that activity. Yeah, it is very directive and very strong policy. In terms of my introduction, I don't really have anything more to say. Happy just to take answers. Questions, sorry.
That would be most efficient. Thank you. I do have questions for you. Mostly just points of clarification from your primary evidence. So back to the permitted baseline. So we've heard today a few from the legal and also the landscape in relation to permitted baseline. This is your experience in RMA planning consenting?
Yes.
Yes, so could you just talk to me about your understanding of, I guess, the orthodox application of permitted baseline?
Yes, so I address in my primary evidence, I address permitted baseline at page 27. So the Centro Otago District Plan does enable a certain amount of quarrying as a permitted activity. It puts thresholds on the area and the volume, an area of up to 2,000 square metres and quantity of 3,000 square metres of material can be excavated or displaced. I'm unsure if that is an annual amount or a fixed total amount. The plan isn't very clear on that. I would assume that it's an annual amount so that small quarrying activities can continue into the future. In terms of permitted baseline, that in my view, that does create a baseline of what effects can be anticipated to, a small quarry like that can have just as much effects in terms of dust and noise, particularly since there's no actual conditions controlling those effects as well. So so there certainly is a true permitted baseline in terms of what can be undertaken under the plan.
Great, thank you. And at paragraph 4.4, you have a statement about no restriction on duration. So that's your experience with land use consents, that duration, they're not typically imposed on land use?
For a quarry of this size, I would say no. A smaller quarry was actually issued to the CODC recently at a duration of 10 years. but that was sort of like a small finite resource. And then there's obviously some very large quarries up in the North Island that are going through the fast track applications process, one of which had a duration of 100 years.
Mm.
And then another one that had no duration. So it is a bit of a mixture.
So it's quite specific to the resource
Yeah,
and the
size of
proposal
the resource.
and the factors contributing to that particular activity,
Yes.
rather than a expectation that a district plan that you
Yeah,
have a,
yeah.
term.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. At paragraph 420. You made mention of section 95. And I wasn't sure of the point that you were making here.
Right, sorry. I guess the point I was making there was so that was in relation to Mr. Anderson's point about adverse effects on the productive use of the site. My reference to section 95, I can't quite remember, but I think there was reference in that report about productive use and that not being a reason for notification determination.
Right,
It's probably not a big issue.
no. So you were making a comment about
Yeah,
the notification determination.
yeah, in terms of the effects on productive use.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the bond, at paragraph 428, you're, from a planning perspective, your view is that it's not necessary, strictly necessary? Would that be a fair interpretation of your evidence?
Yes, it is. I guess the way I see it, if this was on anything but privately owned land, perhaps a bond is appropriate to ensure that once the quarrying finished, that it was left in a satisfactory state. But here it's private land. It's valuable land. Even after the quarrying activities, it's likely to be valuable land. And it's very, very unlikely that road vehicles or whoever in the future own it will just walk off the site and leave it. And then that's where I've tried to change the intent of the bond so it does just relate to the remediation or rehabilitation on a 10-year period.
Thank you. And in the conditions attached to your supplementary, you're comfortable with the proposed mechanisms
Yeah.
included at 23C and 23B on, all of the bond conditions.
I did look at quite a few quarry consents and that had bonds, and it seems that this mechanism of not having a figure up front was quite common. Referring to a qualified independent quantity surveyor to do their assessment on an ongoing basis.
So now, jumping around a little bit here, sorry. Paragraph 434 in your primary evidence in terms of cumulative effects. What is my question? My question is, I guess, just from your experience as a planner, how you would interpret cumulative impacts in this scenario.
Yeah, I think Mr. Eastby summarised it quite well in terms of landscape effects. The cumulative effect is the proposal in addition to the surrounding landscape or area or environment. So I could see what Mr. Anderson was getting to in his evidence, but technically the term cumulative effect probably wasn't quite correct.
Sure, thank you. I did have that question to Mr. Walton around the truck movements and the conditions. Did you have any comment on that today in terms of whether there's any remaining difference between the two noise experts, whether there's a difference there?
If my conditions had created a difference, I didn't need to do that.
Well, there may not be. I'm just not sure if I've interpreted the respective evidence and then the condition. But that might be something you could look into.
I'm not too sure either because when I circulated, when our evidence was circulated at the same time.
Yes.
I don't think Mr. Walton had read my revised conditions at that time. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question about your concerns so that we understand precisely what's bothering you so that we can answer it with some precision? So if we go to the conditions that are attached to Mr. Vivian's supplementary.
Yes.
And you look at condition 8. And this is concerning load-out and haulage operations for frequent emergency works.
Yeah.
The way that condition 8 is drafted in Mr. Vivian's evidence, and we go to the top of page 7, it says provided truck movements do not exceed more than 4 truck movements per hour. As I understood Mr. Exeter's evidence, he was recommending 1 truck per 15 minutes. Is your question driving at the difference between 1 per 15 minutes and 4 per hour? Is that
potentially? I thought I had picked up somewhere that there was no more than 2 truck movements per hour. And then I wondered whether it was the ingress egress being counted as 1. And so I just wasn't clear whether what Mr. Exeter was recommending had translated into the most recent condition in line with Mr. Walton's.
All right.
And I'm not sure if there is an inconsistency, but I would appreciate a bit of clarity there. Yeah.
So Jared's just helpfully pointed out to me something that I haven't spotted, but the 2 truck movements per hour condition is in 8A.
The short-term constraint.
Yeah.
Short-term 2 truck, right. So 8A, that could be then.
So we're dealing with subtly different circumstances.
Yes.
So we've got infrequent emergency works, which are in 8. And there's a live legal argument about whether you need to apply for those anyway, but probably it's monsters, so there we go. But 8A is not for emergency works, it's short-term infrastructure works outside the normal hours. And
Right.
that's where the 2 truck movements per hour.
It's possible, yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. It's possible that I have
Yeah.
mixed up the metrics in
Yes.
the different different conditions.
I wanted to have this discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful.
And then there's condition AB, which is emergency works and infrastructure.
Yes.
600 truck movements
Yes,
per year.
yes. Okay,
Just
thank you.
Can I just ask her just to follow on from that? The emergency works, are they only to be, from my reading, it was to be outside of the normal operating times? So emergency works are only, or can emergency works be considered within the normal operating time if there was an emergency? And so that would elevate
Yeah,
the amount that could be happening per hour or
Well,
per day.
certainly what I understand is if it's in the normal operating hours, and there's an emergency work situation, then road metals will just operate under their existing consent. But if those emergency works carry on into the night, that's where the emergency works provisions come in. So it's outside of normal operating hours. And we were discussing this morning, actually, the example was used in Selwyn, I think it was, where the council needed metal for emergency works and road metals didn't have that provision in their consent. So he said, sorry, we can't supply that metal at night. And the council had to bring metal in from 80 kilometres away to undertake that new emergency works. So it's just capturing those little emergency work situations.
Thank you. I think that's probably resolved the niggle I had with the drafting of conditions, and possibly resulted from me jumping between different versions of conditions, but I appreciate you talking us through that. That's very helpful. Thank you. And I think my other questions have all been answered throughout the various witnesses appearing. I'll just check if the panel has anything further.
No, for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's the end of the evidence for the applicant.
Mhm.
Would
Can I just raise one more thing? The fish passage condition.
Oh, yes, yes.
ORC. Well, what I was trying to do there was, the fish, the culvert's been designed, got ORC approval, DOC had approved it, Mr. Lawson was happy with it. It was a very difficult thing to design because it's pretty much flat. But everyone's happy with it. So I just didn't want, this condition, if it's needed, and maybe it's not in hindsight, but I didn't want this condition to alter that design. And then we have to go back to the ORC, have to go back to DOC to alter the design of it. So,
yes, I can understand that, and having had some experience in fish design.
but I think it is needed because it is part of the this land use consent proposal in terms of the design of the road. So it probably needs to be there, but just so long as, if everyone's happy with what's been approved by the ORC.
Yes.
We can keep it the same.
Yes.
And that's what I was trying to do with the Iceland.
And there's no additional administrative requirement there for the CODC in any case?
No.
Because it's simply referring to, yeah. Okay. Thank you. And actually, while we're on conditions, condition 12. I think my question may have already been answered, but my earlier question to the legal, to Ms. Perkin around in the event that the Otago Regional Council consents are not renewed, does that create a risk for any rehabilitation, and therefore should there be a link to some of the other, internal linkages between some of the other conditions? But I think that's been resolved now, I think, in the sense that the rehabilitation would not be prevented in any case through.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so, yeah, right, okay. So nothing more to add there? Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, look, it's just after 12:20. We've come to the end of the evidence for the applicant. Thinking on my feet right now, what we do with the rest of the day. You will have had some sense from our team that there's been a little bit of being at cross purposes with the reporting officers because of the sequence of events.
Yes.
You're scheduled to be here all afternoon, and so are we. What I'm going to suggest to you, at risk of being beaten up over lunchtime, is to, if there are matters that remain of concern around mechanical things like condition drafting between the reporting officers and our team, we actually get the experts to caucus that either during or shortly after lunch. So we've got a fighting chance of them coming back after lunch and presenting you with an agreed position rather than having to figure it out. Seems to me that might be an efficient use of time.
Yes.
I'm more than content to make oral closing submissions this afternoon, but I've got no idea what I might say.
Yes, yes.
So it would be helpful to know kind of where the staff sit so that we know
Absolutely.
what extent we're still apart.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Would you be happy with that? Yep. Yep. Well, we're fine with that. That would be quite helpful from our perspective. So if you could arrange that with the relevant experts.
Yes.
And then would that be after, so you're suggesting that we break for lunch?
Yes.
And then how much time would the experts require to caucus?
I'm trying to think that I asked Mr. Morrison if he's available to phone Mr. Harding if they have each other's contact and see if, is everything resolved or are they still apart? So at least I know that. And Mr. Espy could do the same with Ms. Wilson and Mr. Vivian with Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
And with a bit of luck, they'll at least have some precision about the things that they may or may not agree upon.
Yes.
If everybody is agreed, then happy days.
Yes, that's perfectly acceptable to me and will be very helpful.
Might be easier in the term than I do this.
Well, you guys figure out the best way to do that yourselves. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So shall we break for slightly longer lunch then to give everyone a chance to get refreshments and do that?
And we can reconvene at 2.
Okay.
Then at that stage we should have we should know what the rest of the afternoon looks like.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you all back here at 2 p.m.
And thanks to staff for working with our team. I think it's been time well spent from what Kerry and Ben have reported back to us. In terms of reporting back to you, so you know what's been going on, perhaps if I can invite Kerry to outline what's been resolved and what remains outstanding to be resolved, and then we can decide what to do after that.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
Mr. Vivian.
So if you go to my supplementary evidence, which has the most up-to-date provision. The first change that we thought was appropriate was condition 3.
Yes.
Now, telling you might hear that. I think stage 2 should read 3 to 15. And stage 3, year 15 plus.
Okay.
So we're agreed on that.
Thank you.
Next change is condition 10D. The certified quarry management plan must be updated at least every 5 years by the applicant. And then the addition of the words or prior to the start of each stage, whichever comes first. And that was Hannah's recommendation. And that's just to ensure going from one stage to the other, that you look at the landscape management.
Yes, okay.
So that's agreed. The next one is condition 13, 13A and 13B. Now, if you've got the plan, the site plan,
So hang on, so this is the one attached to Mr. Espy's supplementary evidence?
yeah.
Right.
Let's go to that.
So that the latest version's got the purple shout outs on it.
Yes, just give us
Um,
a second to bring that up.
Okay.
Just jumping around a few documents. So that was supplementary, you said, of Mr. Espy.
So
Thank you. Yeah.
So Mike is happy with all of the shelter outs being exotic, except the one on the southern terrace, above the red hatched area. And Mike's preference would be for that to be, indigenous vegetation like Kamuka or Pinsporum or something like that. It doesn't have to grow that high. It needs to be 3 to 4 meters for screening. So Hannah is happy with that. And the client is happy to make that an indigenous vegetation beachroad.
Thank you. And just so that I've understood exactly where that is. So I'm on,
Want me to come and show you?
thank you. There's just a few sheets here.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's only one attached there. Actually, there is only sheet one. Yeah.
So it's that hetero starting there and finishing there. Oh, there.
That's the one that Mr. Harding would like to be Indigenous.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And the applicant is happy.
Yes. 13D, that's just a little typo, so it's nothing to worry about.
So which one, what's the title? Next, sorry?
The last sentence of the first paragraph, the EMP must implement that relevant.
Already.
On 13E, 13D-C, pest control, Mike would like it to be clarified that it's pest and animal, no, plant and animal pest control, which is agreed.
Okay.
13F, the last sentence, if the consent holder has not received a response from the council within 20 working days of the date of submission, Mike would like that increased to 40 working days. However, the applicant doesn't accept that the agreement is to leave it at 20 working days.
And so that's 13F, 40 working days as opposed to 20 working days.
Yes.
And what's the reason for your disagreement there?
Well, we figured that this is just certifying the ecological management plan. So there shouldn't be any need for, I guess Mr. Harding's concern is the council will come to him. The plan is lodged, the council will come to him and ask him to certify it or comment on it, I guess. And yeah, he's very busy and probably can't get it done within that time period. The applicant's concern is that the way the conditions are drafted, quarrying can't start until that has been certified. And 2 months is just too long.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and also consistent with the other conditions with the recognised.
Yeah.
Condition 13I, this is the central gully area.
Mm-hmm.
We agreed that that condition needs a little bit of work still. Mike really wants feed and animal control included into that.
Not animal control.
No, because it's fenced, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. Just weed control added into that.
Clarify that it includes the whole central gully, not just the part on the road that's property. So just to clarify. Yeah. And I think it'd be very useful if the two actions were no clearance of indigenous vegetation, but also plant pest control, because that's the other one. It's the main street to there, which we will cover in the gully.
So then compared with that. The lighting conditions we agree, 15A, 15B. And everything else, Tim and I pretty much agree, including the bond condition.
Okay. So what you've just taken us through, Mr. Vivian, is the result of the focusing with landscape experts, ecology experts, and planning.
Yeah.
So the 3 technical inputs. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the only condition in dispute is the working days.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. I think I'll capture the everything. Yeah. Great.
Okay, well, I mean, from our point of view, that's been really, really productive. We've now got the narrows to narrow the points. I suppose what happens next is for Tim to formally advise you of what his recommendation now is in the light of that. And whether there's a need for us to exercise a right to reply after clinical coordination, we'll figure out when we know what it is.
Yeah.
If there's no need for a right to reply, then we can simply fire a clean set of conditions. If there is a need for reply and submissions about that, then we'll just take front of that. What's going to consider.
Right. Thank you. Well, thank you for suggesting and leading the exercise. That has been most helpful to the panel. Thank you. Okay. Over to staff. So, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, I'll just say that Mr. Exeter is their own team, so from Styles Group.
Thank you.
Peer review on all this. He informs me that what he's seen so far raises nothing new for him, but he is available to take questions.
Thank you. Mr. Exeter, thank you for appearing today. So we'd be interested in, Mr. Anderson has just summarised your position, but it will be useful for us to hear from you in terms of the key issues of concern that you had, whether they are now resolved, and if there's anything remaining in contention.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So there weren't any major issues or points of disagreement or difference. I've had some questions at the Section 92 stage, and they were cleared up, and I generally agree with the conclusions presented in the acoustic report. And I've reviewed the acoustics evidence, and was listening this morning, and there weren't any additional matters raised. Nothing that would make me change my conclusions or have any areas of disagreement. I can, however, I heard this morning there were some questions about how my recommended conditions differed from the applicant's draft. Yeah, I'm happy to clarify that if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful, just to cover that off for me. That would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, I made some notes here. I'll just get those. So my recommendations came from the information that was provided in the acoustic report and the Section 92 response. And so my understanding was that for the night works, there would be 500 trucks per year on weekdays and 100 trucks per year on Sundays and public holidays. And it seems that the applicant's condition has lumped those two together to say 600 truck movements per year, whereas I had separated them out.
Right. Okay. So that's probably the just a slight inconsistency, but there's no material outcome that you're concerned with that slight.
Correct. That's
Okay.
right.
Thank you. And
Sorry, there was one other point with the conditions. One other point where it differed is the truck movements were limited to, I think in the conditions it says 2 per hour. Where originally it said 4 per hour for the 500 trucks, and then 2 per hour for the 100 trucks that'll be on Sunday or public holidays. And when we assess noise under the 2008 standards, which are being proposed, we look at noise in nominal 15-minute blocks. And so any more than 2 truck movements, so that's say 1 truck going in and out within a 15-minute period, could potentially generate noise levels over the 40 dB limit or 38 LEQ limit. And so I included that in my condition to say that there could only be a limited number of truck movements in any 15-minute period, and that hasn't been included in the proposed conditions.
right. But am I reading correctly that you're not concerned about that?
Well, it seems that I understand from the acoustic report that all the truck movements would be scheduled in any case, and so that it could be avoided to make sure that there aren't several truck movements, or those 4 truck movements in an hour wouldn't all be within the same 15 minutes. So
Okay.
I guess that would come down to an operational thing, and if there is, I don't know if there's a management plan that potentially be included in there.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. I'll just check to see if we have any questions for you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Exeter. That's we have no further questions for you.
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all. Just a few words.
Yes, please. Thank you.
What's been covered this morning, although we have had a useful session to resolve some of those issues. I just want to touch on the area of ecological significance, because that was the response to my review. I was perhaps a bit remiss in my evidence just referring to the UPSAB, and I'd still like to point out to the panel that the Otago PS is also applicable here. And there just appears to be no dispute between the applicants, ecologist, and myself that there's Indigenous vegetation of value here.
Yes.
And so it is a relevant issue, even though you sort of may not apply as it being an SNA as such.
Yes.
Still. And with regard to that,
Right, so yeah, policy 3.2, typically a tagline is, does require avoidance of effects on areas of significant visual vegetation. So that is a live issue still.
Yes, so what was the policy reference there?
Policy 3.2.2, the Otago Regional Policy Statement.
Yes, thank you.
In some respects, it's a bit academic because of what's being proposed. And also, my next point is also that the one area of disagreement I have with the ethics ecologist is the level of effects. He stated that no more than one, whereas my advice to the council is still what those effects are more than one. And the reason I advise that is the Central Gully is supporting significant indigenous vegetation habitat. The effect of placing a road through it will fragment that site. So there is a significant effect, of more than minor effect in my view. But again, I think regardless of people's or the party's position on that, the residual effects management does address, or the effects management does address the residual effects by what's being proposed. So I'm not sure how important that difference is now.
Could you just say that again and just speak up a little bit more loudly? Thank you.
The main issue of where I differ from Reverend Royston is that the effects of putting a road through that area of indigenous vegetation and habitat would be more than minor. But the applicant has acknowledged that and they're proposing some residual effects management, namely the restoration area and namely the protection provisions they're proposing for the Central Gully.
Yes.
So in a sense, they're addressing those effects.
Yes, so following the proposed mitigation.
Yes.
So
even though there's dispute about whether they need to, they are in fact
yes.
managing those effects and proposing to manage those effects.
Thank you. And so what is your view of taking into account the management and the mitigation?
My view is that I think that management of the whole gully is more important than perhaps intensive management of the restoration area. I don't have any problem with what they're proposing there, but I think, and as came up in conversation just prior, I think undertaking not to remove indigenous vegetation from the Central Gully is an important provision. It's the district plan provisions. The district plan is quite weak with respect to restrictions on indigenous vegetation clearance. So it's useful to have that as a consent condition. So
yes.
No clearance of indigenous
yes.
in the Central Gully, in the whole area. But the next most important management activity is weed control.
Right, which is where you are wanting that to be a little bit more clarified in the condition set.
I guess just to put this in context, I mean, at first glance, it is a modified gully, mostly grassy with scattered shrubs through it. But I guess the context for it is that in this part of the district, there's been widespread land use change. Just about every land alluvial service has been developed in some way, and the remaining indigenous biodiversity in the district is in these gullies. That's where we have those values remaining, and especially on depositional landforms, which have a form of, well, they recognise as being underprotected. So if you look at the planning instruments or the FSOB or the RPS, when they talk about ecosystem protection or extended vegetation, it is pertinent here because those gullies are where the remaining biodiversity is, even though it's modified.
Yes.
And then further to that, if the most useful thing you can do with these gullies ecologically is leave them alone, just let them recover and manage that recovery by addressing the threats rather than going to do the whole planting. But in saying that, it's definitely worthwhile rehabilitating the abandoned road and perhaps planting on that to restore that because it's a disturbed part of it.
Yes. Okay.
The only other thing which doesn't have a government consent condition discussion because it's not there, and it's a planning issue more than an ecological issue, but I'm raising it because of my experience as an ecologist in monitoring consent compliance, and is that it'd be very useful for there to be some, or for council to have some certainty that those actions are going to occur, that there's funding for them to occur. So in other words, the ecological management of the gully, and I don't quite know how you put that either in terms of how you, or whether you can, but I'll just mention that as being, I think that would be a useful outcome to try and achieve is to have some certainty that the consent holder has the commitment and funding to actually do that level over the long term. Because frequently that stuff falls away once the consent is given. So
Is that in your evidence where, or your peer review evidence, where you're talking about a contingency fund? Is that what you're meaning? Right.
so what that leaves is, I guess, two outstanding issues for me. One is whether there is in fact an alternative road alignment that can be used, which would avoid putting the road through that central gully. And the response to that has been that for reasons other than ecological reasons, that's not possible. So I can say no more about it because there's no further evidence provided the ecological, the independence and the effects of both ecology. But it just remains sitting there as an issue which is not being addressed in terms of ecology. And then the other outstanding issue, I can say, was the planting on the terrace riser on Central Gully. And it seems that we've resolved that through discussions that need to be points that can actually be later. So it's far more appropriate adjacent to that area which have additional planting. I guess there's one other issue which I'll raise, but I think it's resolvable, and that is you'll see from my evidence I have some concerns about what would happen when you excavate the back of the terrace riser. So in other words, you excavate the quarry and you've left with a terrace riser, which is, I guess, stranded in some sense. And whether that will affect what's growing on that terrace riser. And I don't think we can answer that. The response, the applicant's response is to provide some more geotechnical advice. And on reflection, I don't actually think it's a geotechnical issue. I think it's actually an issue about it's a water deficit issue, if you know what I mean. Because in a dry environment, if what's growing there is determined by the extremes, which will be drought in this case, when you've got a high water deficit. And my question, I suppose, is if you rather than having a complete terrace with vegetation growing on the edge of it, if you excavate the back of that terrace and you have a hole, does that affect the moisture holding capacity of the soil on that remaining terrace rising?
Right.
And I don't think we can answer that. It's not something I can answer, but I just raise it as being a bit of uncertainty, I suppose.
Can you point to that section in your evidence, just so I can read that?
Yes, so in my evidence, it's at paragraph 26, recommendation 4, ecological integrity of the terrace rising.
Paragraph 26.
Paragraph 26.
26.
Page 9.
Recommendation, ecological integrity of the terrace rises.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think.
Oh, yes, I remember that reading this now about the.
I think on reflection, it's not a geotech issue, it's actually an issue about water deficits and soil drying out.
And is that within your specialty, water deficit?
Well, only just as a general ecologist, I don't know really how you would answer that question. I just think it remains an uncertainty.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what to advise. Sorry.
Okay. So, so you're raising it as an issue, but it's not really something you would ordinarily be qualified to pursue, discuss?
I think a lot of what that says is a risk.
Right.
It should be a risk, but I couldn't. And I guess I need to understand a bit more. I'm probably in the place to get enough. Is what's the extent of material left at the edge of the terrace riser? Pouring. I guess if that was backfilled properly, so you weren't left with such a narrow scarp for so long, that would be helpful. So it could be something to consider with more management. But yeah, so I'll leave it a little bit up there.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you. And in relation to condition 13I about the no Indigenous vegetation clearance, you're happy with that condition, subject to the agreement that you've made with the applicant today. So does that suggest that you no longer hold the position that a covenant is necessary?
I guess I'd defer to planners. I think what, as an ecologist, what I'd be seeking is to make sure there's a balance
Yes.
to that. And I guess with a consent condition, it's there to the term of consent, whereas a covenant's more enduring. So that's the issue.
Okay.
I think that'll be,
Okay.
and with respect to 39, we had an agreement, an understanding that would be for the whole government. There's been I think an agreement that would be plant pest control as well, but we haven't actually finalised the wording for that condition. So subject to what we said, wording of that is.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. I'll just check if we have any further questions for you. Nothing? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think just to start, obviously my evidence being prepared on the 1st of April and my statement, and then having since reviewed Mr. SP's evidence and supplementary evidence, it's almost superseded from what I've said.
Yes.
So I've just got a few bullet points and some notes just to help summarise.
Thank you.
Yeah, after reviewing it last week. So I think overall there's broad agreement between myself and Mr. SP with regard to the landscape values, description of the existing environment. We're also very well aligned in terms of visual effects. And now the shelter belt is in place north of the upper terrace and the staging has been outlined. I can say I completely agree with Mr. SP. Initially, I had stated that I thought effects would be very low from state railway space, but now I'm able to see the staging and in addition to the planting, I'm happy that we're in full agreement there. And we both agree that at closure, landscape effects would be low. I still, and it was great to have that the conference thing over lunch. I think it helped just to work through some of the, you should call them concerns. I still believe there's a material effect within the site, some moderate effect within the site. However, considering the objectives around maintaining and enhancing rural character and amenity within the district, I don't believe that they would be more than minor in the context of the receiving environment or the landscape as identified in this piece. Evidence given the containment of the activity within the site.
Okay.
The only real, I use the term issue loosely. I think all the answers are here. And we talked through that over lunch regarding the staging. Just in terms of, it's good to see the incorporation of updating 10D to say at least every 5 years or per stage, because they go through a stage quite quickly or may take longer than 5 years. But I think just looking at the staging as it is now on the sheet that was prepared for supply and Mr. SP's evidence, the indicative sections, well, as I reiterate, I don't think it's overcritical. I think they can be sorted out with that condition, but they don't quite align with how I would imagine the extraction would occur in terms of the beaching within each stage. It almost would create gully down one side and you rehab that and do the other. So I think the message I'm trying to convey here is that condition will be really helpful, particularly the council and for some of those issues raised in the submissions to give certainty around landscape outcomes for each stage. And some of those things that Mr. Johnston spoke about, that would be great to see in the section on how the road works and how the beaching works within each area of staging. So the answers are there, I think. Yeah, so that really is all I wanted to say.
No, thank you. So in relation to 10D, just so that I'm clear, were you saying that you're happy with that condition based on the agreed amendment
Yes,
today?
correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Just to include that staging.
Yeah, great.
Text.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions of you, I don't think, but I'll ask the panel members if they have while I'm looking for my questions. Do you have any further questions? No? No? That's it. Thank you. You've answered everything well. Everything's very clear. Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, my name's Tony Anderson. I'm employed at the City of Otago District Council as a planning team leader. I have 10 years experience in resource planning. I hold a master's degree from the University of Otago, and I am an intermediate member of the New Zealand Planning Institute. Firstly, in terms of the overall activities that are applied from this test, I did note that Mr. Copeland mentioned Rule 12.713, which is in respect of accesses that are established within 200 metres of a highway of another access. In this instance, he identifies a neighbour's access at 140 metres, so technically the proposed access would be a breach of that standard, and that is a restricted discretionary activity. However, I accept Mr. Copeland's expert assessment, and the NZTA approval that was provided gives me further comfort. So I would consider that any effects on road safety and other effects related to that are acceptable.
So, Mr. Anderson, are you saying that that wasn't
included in my 42A?
Right.
Don't agree with the application, however, it is referenced in Mr. Copeland's evidence.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Overall, I accept Mr. Page's position on cumulative effects, given the reference to case law. There is on that side an aggregation of effects, and prior to seeing additional evidence, there wasn't a lot in terms of parameters or controls on it. Nevertheless, I don't see these effects as being, well, I agree that they're not associated with existing effects within the receiving environment, just a combination of effects from the activity itself. The further details that have been provided do give me more comfort about the overall scale of effects. For example, there's a stated depth of 60 metres, when previously it was inferred that there was a resource to 90 metres, and the staging, the further staging of stage 3 provides mechanisms which will enable the activity to be better managed through its duration. I do also accept that there'll be a great deal of uncertainty based on market fluctuations, etc., in terms of the timescale. On the basis of the further information received, I no longer recommend the condition on the duration. In terms of what Mr. Page said about anticipated activities, I may be stumbling a little bit into semantics on this. However, the application on the whole is discretionary for the extraction, as well as a trigger for the nature and the scale and the overall effects of the activity. The district plan does, in my opinion, contemplate and provide for mineral extraction. However, I wouldn't make a leap to say that that would, say that it's necessarily anticipated. There's also within the district plan framework, another alternative that's often used for gravel extraction, and that's the scheduled activities. So various sites throughout the district do have schedules on them for gravel extraction. It's possible to continue those uses as a permitted activity, and it's also possible to expand them as a controlled activity. However, there are no schedules on this site. So yeah, overall, I would say it's an activity that's provided for, but in my opinion, I wouldn't consider it to be anticipated.
So just on that note,
Yeah, sure.
if there's a consenting pathway for an activity which the issues and objectives of a zone specifically provide for, and there's a consenting pathway, are you saying that then that activity is not anticipated?
That's, I mean, that's, well, I guess under my understanding and usual reference to what anticipated would mean.
So when you say anticipated, do you mean permitted and controlled?
Yes,
Or-
yeah.
Right, okay. So a discretionary or a restricted discretionary is, my understanding of that is that it's a trigger for a closer look. A non-complying would be perhaps further towards something. That's just my understanding, but that's interesting. Is that you obviously, is that something you apply differently in this district than elsewhere, or?
I'm happy to accept that.
Okay.
So accept it.
Okay.
Anticipated, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm just interested in your opinion, yeah, and how you've reached it. Yes.
Yeah. I guess where I previously worked, the application would be, if it's permitted or controlled, it would be considered anticipated.
I see. So it's a, yeah, right. Yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from.
Elements of semantics, obviously.
Yeah, which are often important in planning. Yes, thank you.
I don't think I need to go further over the conditions. They've been very helpfully discussed, and I think broadly there is agreement. I do, to an extent, support Mr. Harding's position where it comes to the 20-day time frame. Under certain circumstances, if something has to go to council and then out to a consultant to review it and then come back to us, it can take up a fair amount of time, and if it's a straight 20-day time frame unable to be expanded, it may in some instances not leave us a great deal of time.
Okay.
But broadly speaking, I agree with Mr. Vivian's condition recommendations. And overall, I recommend that the decision be granted with conditions. And that is a change from my initial recommendation in my planners report.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions for you, Mr. Anderson, around, so you've addressed the permitted baseline and you've addressed the cumulative effects. With regard to national policy statements, have you been able to contemplate the NPS infrastructure?
Yes, I see that as a more enabling pathway, as Mr. Vivian said, when this application was applied for, that didn't exist, so that's why it hasn't been considered to this point. I also accept of what Mr. Page has said in reference to the NPS HPL to reach the same conclusion, but
Okay. So in terms of the duration, you've said that you're comfortable that the consent is no longer limited on its duration. Is that correct?
yes, the point was raised that short of reapplying for ORC permits, etc., the activity can't continue anyway. And I think just the additional information provided gives me more certainty. There were 2 examples given of timeframes. One which at maximum extraction would see the activity last 32 years, and alternatively 80 years. And I'm a lot more comfortable with that time range rather than having to have a specific lapse.
Great, thank you. And in terms of the proposed bond conditions, are you comfortable? What's your response to that?
I think what's proposed is a helpful mechanism, and it can be tied to the staging. And I think in this instance, it's best for the board to be initially in the court with the applicant to assess things and to come up with a figure.
Okay. In terms of Mr. Harding's concerns about alternative access routes, have you contemplated from a planning perspective whether the consideration of alternatives is required?
It was loosely considered. I accept overall Mr. Harding's position that he thinks maybe more than minor with that location. However, there's various reasons why alternatives would perhaps be less acceptable. Like there could be, obviously there'd be longer routes and there'd be more potential for dust and noise, and so on balance, I find the proposed access to be acceptable. We also have had the design looked at specifically by a consultant, Bonishers, and that's another element of that access. It's been considered by the experts to be geologically stable and suitable.
Thank you. And as for your policy assessment, you had raised some elements that, in your opinion, were contrary and also inconsistent with some of the key policies. Is your position the same, or would you like to speak to any of those?
Overall, I wouldn't consider the proposal to be contrary to the district plan.
Sorry, what was that? Overall?
Overall, I would consider.
You wouldn't?
Consider the proposal to be contrary to the objectives and policies of the district plan.
there are some inconsistencies. Based on, I guess, the overall scale of the activity and perhaps rural character, for example, and the use of the soil, although it is all reinstated and overall the end result, I would consider things that are appropriately mitigated.
Right, and so does that change your policy conclusion if things are mitigated, or?
Yes, I think with the mitigation proposed, I would consider that our overall proposal is not contrary to the objectives and policies of the district plan or regional or national policy statements.
And when you say, sorry to labour the point, but it is important for the that I understand your assessment. When you say not contrary, does that mean consistent?
I think there are still inconsistencies.
Right. And is that just looking at your appraisal? Landscape, soil, amenity, are they the ones, the key ones for you?
You said inconsistent with landscape, 442. However, over the long term, with the rehabilitation, I consider it to not be contrary. Inconsistent with 448, adverse effects on the amenity values of neighbouring properties. However, in this instance, we now have the written approvals of both nearby properties. I think the Gregory Gully approval was certainly changed my position in terms of effects on persons.
Okay. So what's your review?
Overall, I would say with the written approvals, that it's consistent. There have been submissions by neighbours, but they were not within near proximity, and none of them have spoken to their submissions.
Okay. Thank you. So 448 and 442 were the key ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And 446? That was
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I guess the effects on the soil resource are largely temporary during the process of extraction and rehabilitation. But overall, I find it acceptable and not contrary to 446.
acceptable, not contrary. Thank you. Your summary statement appeared to cover different material from this consent. And I just wanted to check with you that it was an error and that that we're not missing anything.
Yes, that was an error. I believe. It may have actually been an earlier draft than yeah, if you're reading parts that aren't related to activity, that would be in there as even an error.
Okay. I'll just check if we've got any further questions for you, Mr. Anderson. Any further questions? Yes.
I've just got one, just, you refer to that there's no other national environment standards. And I was just wondering whether there was any consideration in relation to electricity transmission and the putting of the power underground. And the reason why I asked that is because when we were on site, that when we viewed the power lines, we were advised that the power was intended to go on underground.
Structure on the side is not a matter that I've turned my attention to. Is this a line that actually crosses the extraction area?
It's on that first, the first part of so years 1 to 3 on that, so the lower terrace adjacent to the tree line. The bottom tree line, if you come in from the river.
So I'm not, it's not in here.
Is that something you'd like to
Yeah.
report back on?
Yes, perhaps I'll have a look at.
Yeah.
So this is a private line or a network line?
As far as I understand, it's a network line.
To Laura's.
Yeah.
Laura's.
So it would be controlled activity, as far as I understand, but still require resource consent. So,
Look into that on the topic.
Thank you.
Usually, we works intended around power infrastructure. There are recommendations from Transpower and other authorities about safe practices.
Okay, I think that's probably brought us to the end of our questions, unless there's anything more. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Harding and Ms. Wilson. Appreciate your time today. Thank you. Okay.
Well, firstly, want to thank three from in the room for their cooperation with this process. It has been very constructive today.
Yes.
We've got to a point where the only difference between us is 20 working days or 40 working days on condition 13F. in this, in the spirit of getting stuff done, I'm instructed to offer 30.
Excellent.
But that's not entirely just a horse trading exercise. It brings it into line with the QMP certification period in condition 10D, which was amended to extend that out from 20 to 30 and carries supplementary evidence. And so road metals would be content with the condition 13F certification of the EMP being through the same period, because they probably will get filed once anyway.
Okay.
At 30 working days.
Okay. Good. And
So that's an offer from us.
and that brings it into alignment with 10D.
Yep.
Oh, yes, yes. Mhm. Okay.
Now, so the question is of what to do next. I don't think that there is any utility in me making lengthy, intellectually rigorous closing submissions on things called anticipated environments and stuff like that, because that's not an issue anymore. So let's not do that. I've asked Mr. Vivian how long it will take him to file a clean set of conditions with all of the recommendations drafted in and ready to go and to be considered by you. I won't say certified as consideration. It's a standard decision that you need to make. He can have that done by next Tuesday. I do not anticipate there is any need to file closing submissions with that. The decision that you need to make around the working days at 13F, you have the information that you need about that. There is one point I want to raise in relation to a concern that Mr. Harding raised about the batter slopes. Because that is answered in Mr. Morrison's supplementary evidence. And so the question raised, it doesn't know what will happen if you excavate the back of the rises, whether it will affect the vegetation on the rises. It's not a geotech issue, it's a moisture deficit issue. So if you go to Mr. Morrison's supplementary evidence at paragraph 23, he says, in this case, the engineering geologist has assessed the stability, this is the important bit, and hydrological context of the terrace rises and concluded that the proposed quarrying activity will not affect their physical or ecological integrity. I have relied on that advice in forming my ecological assessment and have no reason to consider that additional geotech input is required. So, Mr. Morrison has received hydrological advice from the engineering geologist about the impacts on the terrace rising. So it's fair for Mr. Harding to raise the issue. We don't have any trouble with doing that, but the evidence answers it and it answers in paragraph 23, Mr. Morrison's. In any case, you do have review powers. And when I say you, I mean the consent authority, because it won't be you as panel. And so if everything suddenly dies because of moisture deficit, you would call the consent in and go. You require them to do something, install irrigation, whatever. So we don't actually have to solve that right now. The Act has processes for dealing with stuff that's unexpected. So everything on that terrace rise is dying because suddenly it's got no moisture. That would be an unexpected outcome. So you don't need to deal with it. That's what reviews are for. I think that was the only loose end. Mr. Harding also would have been comforted if there was a contingency fund available for the work that's to occur. In some respects, I can understand that, but because we've got an ongoing activity on site that produces funds, it's the activity that provides the funding for the work to be done. It's not like a mining application, for instance, where the miner doesn't own the land, it's simply got an access agreement and a mining permit, and they've got a condition that they have to meet at the end of the consent to restore stuff, but they go broke, what do I run it? That's why bonds are usually required, and that's why contingency funds and things of that kind. We don't have that problem here because it's an ongoing consent. It doesn't have a term. Because, and it's self-funding in terms of, well, we sell gravel, make money, and that's how stuff gets paid for. So it's not a situation where you're faced with a live problem of somebody not complying with their consent and doing it. Rather, it's a simple enforcement exercise, just like any other resource consent. And if Road Metals isn't complying with their obligations under the conditions, and the council has enforcement powers. It doesn't need the pot of money to step in and do the stuff itself. Being told to down tools because you're not complying is a fairly mind-focusing thing for an aggregate company to have to face. I think that's all. I can't think of anything that I can usefully say to assist you. If there's anything that is pressing on your minds that we can do to resolve anything of concern, happy to do so.
The only thing would be the question that Commissioner Peterson asked, and I put it to Mr. Anderson that he might be able to look into it. But if you had a comment now,
right,
about that, that would be helpful.
I confess that I wasn't paying sufficient attention to the start of the question.
Yes.
Can you remind me what it was you were concerned about?
Yeah, just that, obviously the reports refer to no other environment standards, national environment standards.
Yeah.
And I refer to the electricity transmission.
Yes.
And there is, from our understanding, that the power is to go underground. However, that isn't, recognised in the reports.
No. And frankly, it doesn't need to be, because it's Aurora's line, it's protected by an easement. And so if there's to be any works in relation to the line, it will be works that Aurora does. What would typically happen in this situation is that if Road Metals required the line shifted or underground, Aurora's usually very accommodating about doing that, but you pay. And then they get their contractors to do the work. So there isn't a need for Road Metals to be concerned about what standards it has to comply with in dealing with the electricity line. There are setbacks from the line, the electricity, it's a set of regulations, the name of which I used to know by heart, but I've forgotten how to knows. Anyway, but it's a local transmission line, so it's about 2 meters or something. Yeah, so we're not going to bang into it with something that is metal and is going to kill anyone. But in terms of actually shifting it, there's no power that Road Metals has to do that. It will be an Aurora job negotiated directly with Aurora at that time.
Thank you.
So my suggestion is you don't need to worry about it.
Thank you. Yes, I'd be interested in Mr. Anderson's planning response to that situation. If you could just, provide an email through Ms. Lyons.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can probably speak with someone in Aurora just to confirm whether or not there will be any issues.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I can tell you that that's going to be land on my desk because we all do Aurora's.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, so okie dokie. So perhaps okay, let me think on that. Right. We do think. That's it. You happy?
Yeah, I mean,
Something written.
I think it would be prudent to have it written, just from our perspective. Thank you. It doesn't have to be lengthy. Just
Thank
something
you.
to confirm.
There's some written confirmation that it's not an issue that we need to be concerned about. Thank you. Okay, so any further questions? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Page. Thank you for the applicant team. Thank you, staff. Yeah, really useful process today. Thank you for the suggestion. I think that really did expedite the process and a good effective use of everyone's time. So we'll adjourn the hearing. We'll receive a bit of additional information from Mr. Anderson. And then Mr. Page, you've outlined a process that Mr. Vivian will provide a revised set of conditions. It would be useful if you could have a tracked version with a comment aside where the changes were agreed by the caucusing, and then a clean version. Thank you.
Can I suggest, because if you look at the supplementary evidence from Mr.
Yes.
Vivian, there's already 2 sets of tracking. today.
There is.
What my suggestion is that all of that tracking gets accepted.
Yes.
It's clean as your starting point.
Yes.
And then only additional things that have happened today get tracked, otherwise we're going to get terribly confused.
Yes, that's an excellent suggestion. Yep, happy for that. That just makes it easier when we're revising the conditions and looking at evidence that we can clearly track where the change came from. That would be most useful. And recording, Mr. Page, that we won't expect a written reply from you and that you've verbally responded to some matters that we've taken notes of.
Yes.
And then when Mr. Anderson's response comes in, of course, you'll have a opportunity to respond to that if you choose to.
Yeah, I'm not expecting we're going to need to.
No.
I understand the need for tidiness on that front.
Thank you. Any other matters? I think that brings us to the close, well, not the close of the hearing, but the end of today's session. And once again, thank you very much. And safe travels for anyone who are leaving the district today. And yes, it's been good working with you all today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.